Chapter 139. The next morning. In the main peak of Ethereal Sect, for Foundation establishment cultivators flew on their swords. 3 men and a woman, speeding towards the front mountain of the sect. Among the 4 of them, the only woman was extremely eye-catching. Her robes were as white as snow, spotless and beautiful. Her skin was crystalline like ice, but her expression was extremely cold and she exuded a cold aura that kept others away. That woman was Lung Ro. Among the 3 men, one of them was plump. He wasn't tall and had a smiling face. It seemed that he would smile at anyone and was very kind. He was little fatty. Of the other 2 men, one of them was Lu Yongrong, who was at mid-stage Foundation establishment. The other was Guanjin. Although he was at early-stage Foundation establishment, he specialized in talismans and was a grade 2 talisman master. Both of them were suitors of Lung Ro. The fact that they were shameless enough to follow Lung Ro to Linfeng City was naturally because they wanted to compete with each other secretly. Sister Lung Ro, senior brothers, I've also called a friend to come with us. Please don't blame me, Little Fatty said with a smile while they were still on the way. Little Fatty was rather popular in the sect and was familiar with everyone. When Lu Yongrong and Guanjin heard that, they merely frowned. Although they were unhappy, they did not say anything. Lung Ro had a better relationship with Little Fatty, so she naturally wouldn't object. Before long, the 4 of them arrived at the front mountain of the sect. A green-robed man stood in front of the entrance. His features were delicate and his expression was indifferent. Beside him was a Linghu. Although he was just lying there, the Linghu was almost as tall as the green-robed scholar. His body was massive and his half-closed eyes flashed with a ferocious glint from time to time. Bro, over here. When Little Fatty caught sight of the green-robed man, he landed hurriedly and waved. When Lu Yongrong and Guanjin saw that the azure-robed man was only at the 9th level of qi condensation, a trace of contempt flashed in their eyes. Naturally, they would not lower themselves to land on the ground, nor would they take the initiative to greet him. Lung Ro's ice-cold gaze swept over the crowd. She was startled when she saw the green-robed man. Then an imperceptible splendor flashed through her eyes. After half a year, the green-robed man did not seem to have changed at all. Even his cultivation realm remained at level 9 qi condensation. But for some reason, Lung Ro felt that this man seemed to have become even more mysterious. If the him half a year ago was said to have shone with boundless radiance, half a year later, he was as deep as the sea, unfathomable. Lung Ro descended slowly and withdrew her flying sword. She arrived in front of the green-robed man and nodded. Little Fatty hid behind Lung Ro and winked at the green-robed man with a lewd expression. Although there was no sound, one could tell what he meant from the shape of his mouth. Look, it's enough of a surprise. The green-robed man smiled and nodded to Lung Ro. Greetings, Senior Sister Lung. Among the 5 peaks, seniority was determined according to the time of entry into the sect. However, all trial disciples would have to address inner sect disciples as senior brother or sister. When Lu Yongrong and Guanjin saw that in midair, they were dumbfounded and shocked. In the sect, Lung Ro was famous for her indifference towards others and did not treat them well. The 2 of them had never seen Lung Ro take the initiative to greet a sect disciple. Furthermore, this person was a trial disciple. Lu Yongrong and Guanjin did not intend to land initially. However, at that moment they came to the ground at the same time with a tacit understanding. Who is this trial disciple? Lu Yongrong purposely emphasized the words trial disciple, and asked in a seemingly casual manner. Fatty hurriedly introduced, this is senior apprentice brother Lu Yongrong, and this is senior apprentice brother Guanjin. The green-robed man smiled and cupped his fists. I am Su Zimo. Greetings, senior brothers. Su Zimo. Both of their expressions changed and their pupils constricted. The moment Su Zimo's name was mentioned, the entire place went silent. A person's name was like a tree's shadow. After the 5 peaks face-off, there were still some inner sect disciples who had not seen Su Zimo in person. However, there was no one else who had not heard of this name. The number 1 of 4 peaks. This was unprecedented. He was only at qi condensation realm and yet he was able to defeat an opponent at Foundation establishment realm. Furthermore, this opponent was currently in the limelight within the inner sect and was already the number 1 of the inner sect. After the battle half a year ago, Many inner sect disciples descended on Weapon Peak, wanting to catch a glimpse of Su Zimo in person. However, their efforts were in vain. Later on, when they found out that Su Zimo had entered Qi Deviation and was locked up in Thunderclap Valley, everyone laughed it off and no longer bothered about it. Everyone knew that there was no way to raise one's cultivation realm while locked up in Thunderclap Valley. Even if a peerless genius was locked up there for an indefinite period of time, their cultivation path would be crippled. It's only been half a year and this Su Zimo is already released? Lu Yongrong and Guanjin were secretly shocked. Given the talent that Su Zimo had displayed in the past, it was only a matter of time before he caught up to them. Lu Yongrong scoffed. No wonder junior sister Lung has a different attitude towards this person. So he's Su Zimo. He doesn't look like anything special. I heard that his body tempering is rather strong. Why does he look like a weak scholar? Guanjin frowned and sized up Su Zimo with a scrutinizing gaze. A moment later, Lu Yongrong suddenly said, Junior brother Su, I've heard a lot about you. Pausing for a moment, Lu Yongrong changed the topic. I heard that junior brother Su was already at level 9 Qi condensation half a year ago. Why hasn't your cultivation improved at all after such a long time? This sentence was completely asking the obvious, and it was full of provocation. Guanjin exclaimed softly and asked curiously, Junior brother Su, I heard that you went berserk from your cultivation. Why are you so careless? You've just come out of Thunderclap Valley. Let me give you a piece of advice. It's better for you to head back and cultivate in seclusion lest anything goes wrong and affect your Dao path. Su Zimo was smart. From the way they looked at Lung Ro, he could vaguely guess what they were thinking. When he heard their sarcastic questions, Su Zimo smiled and replied casually, Thank you for your concern, senior brothers. When he saw Su Zimo's reaction, Little Fatty heaved a sigh of relief. Just now Little Fatty was so nervous that his palms were sweaty. He knew a little about Su Zimo's personality as well. Little Fatty was afraid that the two of them would get into a fight because of a disagreement. Back then, when Su Zimo faced the disciple of the Law Enforcement Hall, Chan Yu, he even dared to draw his knife. The aura of these two before him could not suppress him at all. However, to Su Zimo things were different now. Back at Spirit Peak, Ling Hu was injured and Chan Yu was clearly biased towards him, even wanting to cripple his cultivation. Su Zimo naturally could not tolerate that. Even though the two senior brothers before him were hostile towards him as well, they were just petty thoughts and were nothing much. Su Zimo merely smiled indifferently. Su Zimo no longer looked at Lu Yongrong and Guanjin. He merely reached out and caressed Ling Hu's forehead. Lu Yongrong and Guanjin were enraged. They felt like they were being ignored. Neither of them knew that if Su Zimo had not reached out to comfort Ling Hu, given Ling Hu's wild nature, he would have pounced on the two of them long ago. Chapter 140. Caw-caw. Right then the cry of a crane could be heard not far away. Roar! Ling Hu growled and looked at Little Crane that was flying over, as though he was greeting it. Little Crane had been staying in Misty Peak all this while and had never left the sect. Now that it finally had the chance, it naturally wanted to sneak out to play as well. However, Su Zimo did not dare to make the decision on its own and asked it to return to ask Senior Crane. The moment Little Crane heard that, it became crestfallen. Its mother was extremely strict with it, and once said that it was not allowed to leave the sect until it reached Jin Dan realm. Initially, Little Crane did not harbor much hope. To think that its mother would agree to it unexpectedly when she heard that it was going to travel with Su Zimo. Naturally, Little Crane was overjoyed and chased after them. Isn't that the Little Crane from the sect? Why is it here? Lu Yongrong exclaimed softly. Guanjin replied, Perhaps it's just passing by. Lu Yongrong coughed gently and swept his gaze across Su Zimo and the others, saying in a deep voice, It's said that this Little Crane has an extraordinary background and is the child of the mystical guardian beast of Misty Peak. Guanjin could tell that Lu Yongrong was bragging and could not help but scoff. Which inner sect disciple doesn't know about that? Lu Yongrong raised his brow and harumphed with glee in his eyes. I've interacted with Little Crane before and even fed it once. Given its intelligence, it might even recognize me. In reality, Lu Yongrong was not the one who took the initiative to feed Little Crane. Su Zimo stayed in Thunderclap Valley for half a year. Little Crane had no elixirs to eat and was feeling suffocated. Coincidentally, it met Lu Yongrong and had just gotten a decent elixir when it was robbed by Little Crane. Because of that, Little Crane was even taught a lesson by its mother. Guanjin's expression darkened and he did not say anything else. Lu Yongrong could not help but feel delighted when he felt that he had the upper hand. Right then, Little Crane arrived above their heads and cried twice before descending slowly. Seeing this, Lu Yongrong suppressed the excitement in his heart and no longer looked at Guanjin. He turned slightly to the side and looked at Lung Ro with a smile. Junior sister Lung say this little crane is really intelligent. I only fed it once and it remembered it. It even ran over specially. Haha. The moment he said that, Little Crane descended before them. Lu Yongrong smiled brightly and greeted. Long time no see, Little Crane. Little Crane tilted its head and looked at Lu Yongrong, as though it was trying to recall who the person who was smiling so disgustingly was. He thought for a while but couldn't think of anything. Ignoring that person, Little Crane strode over to Su Zimo. Lowering its head, it rubbed its sharp beak against Su Zimo's arm gently, blinking its eyes and crying softly. Whether or not Su Zimo could bring it out to play this time would depend on whether or not he could bring it along. Little Crane was acting coquettishly. Everyone at the side was dumbfounded, and their jaws nearly dropped to the ground. Anyone who had stayed in Misty Peak for a few years would know about Little Crane. However, none of them had seen Little Crane being so intimate with any cultivator in the sect. Why did its temperament change all of a sudden? Could it not be the child of the mystical guardian beast? That couldn't be right. Furthermore, there was only one crane in the sect. Suddenly Guanjin laughed. "Ayo, this is bad. Who was the one who said that he fed Little Crane shamelessly? Little Crane even recognizes him. TSK TSK TSK. Lu Yongrong was embarrassed and blushed, wishing that there was a hole in the ground to hide in. What's there to gloat about? Perhaps it got the wrong person. Lu Yongrong retorted and walked before Little Crane, smiling with cupped fists. Little Crane, it's me. You must have gotten the wrong person, right? You even ate an elixir at my place a while ago. Have you forgotten? It would have been better if Lu Yongrong did not mention it. The moment he did, Little Crane recalled how its mother taught it a lesson because of that. Caw caw. Suddenly Little Crane cried out with a sharp, piercing voice and a ferocious glint in its eyes. Lu Yongrong was caught off guard and shuddered in fright, retreating a couple of steps back. Ha ha ha. Guanjin could not help but burst into laughter when he saw Lu Yongrong suffer. None of the inner sect disciples knew about the relationship between Little Crane and Su Zimo. Among the people present, Little Fatty was the only one who knew about it. Su Zimo patted Little Crane's head gently and scolded jokingly. Silly bird, what's there to be fierce about? This had always been how the man and Crane got along. However, that scene left Lu Yongrong and Guanjin dumbfounded. Even though Lu Yongrong was an inner sect disciple at Mid-Stage Foundation establishment, he had to address Little Crane respectfully as fellow Taoist. Yet Su Zimo called it a silly bird? Furthermore, this lad even hit Little Crane. The strangest thing was that Little Crane was not enraged and was even rubbing against the lad's arm. Little Fatty looked at Lu Yongrong and Guanjin and shook his head, lamenting to himself, if you guys knew that my bro locked Little Crane up for more than 3 months, you guys would probably be scared silly. Agreed? Su Zimo asked. Little Crane nodded hurriedly with anticipation in its eyes, waiting for Su Zimo to agree. Su Zimo said, all right, let's go together then. Pausing for a moment, Su Zimo felt that something was amiss and turned to Lung Ro and the others, asking, Senior Sister Lung, Senior Brothers, is it all right to bring Little Crane along? No problem. Lu Yongrong was completely dumbfounded as he replied instinctively. Lung Ro's lips curled into a faint smile as she nodded as well. Notwithstanding the fact that Little Crane's strength was equivalent to a Foundation establishment spirit demon, no one present would dare to stop it given its status. Since everyone's here, let's go and try to reach Linfeng City as soon as possible. Little Fatty coughed gently and rubbed his hands. Lung Ro nodded. Lu Yongrong rolled his eyes and an idea popped up in his mind. Suddenly he said, Junior brother, you're right. We've got to reach Linfeng City as soon as possible. However, Junior brother Su's cultivation realm is too low. How can he catch up to us on sword kinesis flight? That's right. Guanjin nodded as well. Even though this trip isn't dangerous, I think it's better if you don't go, junior brother Su. We'll be too slow if we bring you along. Initially, Lu Yongrong and Guanjin were competing in secret. However, after Su Zimo's appearance, both of them felt a sense of danger at the same time. Both of them had a tacit understanding that they would attack Su Zimo the moment they found an opportunity. Just now, they were implying that Su Zimo was a burden to them. However, that was something that Su Zimo could not refute. After all, he was only at level 9 Qi condensation and his speed on sword kinesis flight was far from that of Foundation establishment cultivators. However, if he were to run on the ground, Su Zimo could rely on divine steed fleeting to travel faster than early-stage Foundation establishment cultivators without the power of his bloodline. It's fine, it's fine. Little Fatty smiled. I'll be able to catch up to both of you if I carry you, senior brothers. You're already the slowest among us. Wouldn't it be even slower if you carry someone? Guanjin frowned. Lu Yongrong smiled. How about this? Since I'm the strongest, I'll carry junior brother Su. After saying that, Lu Yongrong glanced at Lung Ro intentionally. Although Lu Yongrong's words seemed like he was helping Su Zimo, there was a hint of bragging behind it. Chapter 141. Little Crane was displeased when it heard that the person before it was complaining that Su Zimo was too slow. It wasn't because it was unfair for Su Zimo. However, if Su Zimo backed out and refused to go out, it wouldn't be able to go out to play as well. The little crane cried out and lowered its body. Ling Hu understood and was the first to jump up with a delighted expression. Little Crane shook its body and gave a look of disdain. However, it did not chase Ling Hu down. It then looked at Su Zimo and gestured for him to hurry up. This time round, even Lu Yongrong and the others understood, let alone Su Zimo. Little Crane was going to carry Su Zimo and fly. The flying speed of a Foundation establishment spirit demon was much faster than Lu Yongrong and the others. Furthermore, who would have thought that the child of a divine guardian beast would be willing to swallow its pride and carry a Qi refinement warrior in flight? What sort of treatment was that? Lu Yongrong and Guanjin's eyes reddened. Their eyes filled with envy and jealousy. If it was the two of them, they would have hopped up eagerly. However, Su Zimo frowned and hesitated for a moment before asking softly, I'm a little heavy. Can you carry me? Su Zimo was wearing the mystic gold silk armor that weighed at least 5,000 kilograms. If he wanted to remove the mystic gold silk armor, he would have to remove his green robes. However, Lung Ro was around and it was inconvenient. There was no way Little Crane would believe that. Pursing its lips, it raised its head and thought to itself, how heavy can a mere Qi refinement warrior like you be? Caw-caw. Little Crane cried, urging Su Zimo to hurry up. Su Zimo coughed gently and reminded, be careful. With that, Su Zimo leaped onto Little Crane's back. Thump! Little Crane was trampled and fell to the ground, eating a mouthful of dirt. Little Crane was enraged and was just short of scolding in human language. How is this a little heavy? This was way too damn heavy. In reality, Little Crane's bloodline was extraordinary. Given its cultivation realm and strength, it would not be a problem for it to carry something that weighed 5,000 kilograms. It was just that Little Crane was not prepared for this at all. Now that there was an extra 10,000 kilograms of weight on its body, it would definitely fall. Su Zimo looked embarrassed and said, why don't I come down? Caw-caw. Little Crane was displeased. This was obviously questioning its ability. Little Crane channeled its bloodline and flapped its wings, taking off in a wobbly manner. Under the envious gazes of Lu Yongrong and Guanjin, it flew out of the sect. Little Fatty summoned his flying sword, waved his arm and shouted, let's go. It did not take long for Little Crane to get used to the weight on its body. Although it was not fast, it was far ahead of Lung Ro and the rest. The 5 men and 2 beasts set off for Linfeng City. Misty Peak wasn't too far away from Linfeng City. Given the speed of an early-stage Foundation establishment cultivator, it would take about a day to get there. Along the way, the 5 of them also met some other self-cultivators. When those self-cultivators saw the sect badges on their waists, they gave way to them respectfully. Be it itinerant cultivators or small sects, all of them had heard of Misty Peak. To them, Misty Peak was a massive entity and no one was willing to offend such an existence. In the blink of an eye, a day passed. As dusk approached, an ancient city gradually came into view. It was the destination of their journey, Linfeng City. Little Crane gradually slowed down. Su Zimo looked at the ancient city in the distance and suddenly narrowed its eyes in deep thought. Lung Ro and the rest caught up from behind. Lu Yongrong closed in beside Little Crane and withdrew an elixir from his storage bag, smiling at Little Crane. "Fellow Taoist, you must be tired. Why don't you have an elixir to replenish your stamina?" Turning its head slightly, Little Crane's eyes lit up as it reached out and grabbed the elixir from Lu Yongrong's palm. Raising its head, it swallowed it. Lu Yongrong was delighted when he saw Little Crane eat the elixir. Along the way, he was extremely envious of Little Crane carrying Su Zimo. Being carried by a flying spirit demon was much cooler than sword kinesis flight. Furthermore, it saved energy as well. Coughing gently, Lu Yongrong said, "Fellow Taoist, do you want me to take a rest as well?" Little Crane turned its head away and ignored him. "You silly." Lu Yongrong swallowed the scolding that was about to come out of his mouth. Su Zimo dared to call Little Crane a silly bird, but he did not have the guts to do so. At the side, Guanjin sneered at Lu Yongrong's joke. Right then, Su Zimo suddenly said, "Everyone be careful. Something's not quite right with Linfeng City." "What's not right?" Lu Yongrong was still fuming after being humiliated by Little Crane. When he heard Su Zimo's words, he retorted immediately, "You're a level 9 Qi refinement warrior. Don't give orders if you don't know anything." "That's right." At this moment, Guanjin was on Lu Yongrong's side and did not give up on attacking Su Zimo. "What's wrong with Linfeng City? I feel that it's very normal. It's already evening and there's no light in the city. It's a little strange." Su Zimo shook his head. Lung Ro frowned slightly. She had clearly noticed that as well. Lu Yongrong snorted softly. "It's not really night yet. Why do we need lights?" Before long, the 5 of them arrived above Linfeng City and descended slowly. This time round, even Lu Yongrong and Guanjin noticed the abnormality in the city. It was too quiet. The streets of the ancient city were empty without a single soul. Even at dusk, it should not be this quiet. It was as though the entire city was empty and everyone had vanished. It was dead silent. Su Zimo and the other 4 landed in Linfeng City and looked around. The shops on both sides of the streets were tightly shut, as though they had not opened yet. The atmosphere in the ancient city was extremely strange and even sinister. Su Zimo's nose twitched, but he did not smell any blood. "What's going on?" Little Fatty asked with a grim expression. Logically speaking, the city lord of Linfeng City should have been prepared by now and sent someone to welcome them. But now there was no one in the entire Linfeng City. Lu Yongrong shook his head but gripped his flying sword tightly with a tense expression. Ling Hu's ears twitched as he scanned his surroundings, scratching the ground with his claws in an uneasy manner. It was the same for Little Crane as it flapped its wings. Pondering for a moment, Lu Yongrong made a decision and said softly, "Let's go and check out the city lord's residence first." He was the one with the highest cultivation realm here. Even though no one said it, he seemed to be the leader. This time round, the 5 of them did not use sword kinesis flight. Apart from Su Zimo, everyone else had expended quite a bit of spirit chi and chose to travel on foot. The 5 of them walked on the empty and quiet streets, keeping an eye on their surroundings and listening to their surroundings, paying attention to any movements. All of a sudden, a commotion sounded from behind the 5 of them. Suddenly, Lu Yongrong felt the hairs on his neck stand on end as he spun around and looked behind. Not far away, a triangular cloth with the word wine fluttered in the wind, letting out a series of sounds. It was a false alarm. Lu Yongrong and the others heaved a sigh of relief. Another strange gust of wind blew and Lu Yongrong suddenly realized that he was drenched in cold sweat unknowingly. "What the F***? Lu Yongrong cursed and continued walking. Chapter 142. Before long, Lu Yongrong stopped in his tracks. There were 2 people sprawled on the streets not far ahead. They were motionless and their faces could not be seen. One of them held a gong in his hands while the other held a baton. By the looks of it, they should be the night watchmen of Linfeng City. It was not really night yet, so how could the night watchmen appear? What was up with them sprawled here? "Hey, the 2 night watchmen in front. Are you dead or alive?" Lu Yongrong gripped his flying sword and did not rush forward, merely shouting from where he was. Guanjin sneered at the side. What can an ancient city of mortals have that's worth being so cautious about? Even though that was what he said, Guanjin gripped a protection talisman in his palm as he walked forward and flipped one of them over. Ah! Guanjin exclaimed and retreated a couple of steps. Su Zimo and the others could see clearly from the back that the person was already dead. Everyone had seen corpses before. However, this was the first time they had seen someone die in such a bizarre manner. The night watchman's cheeks were shriveled and his skin was wrinkled as though all his essence had been drained away. His grayish-white eyes were filled with confusion. Even at the moment of his death, this person probably did not know the cause of his death. Guanjin took a deep breath of air and flipped the other person over with his leg. His death was almost the same as the former. It felt as though the two of them were walking on the streets when they met with misfortune and died on the spot without even having the chance to react. Su Zimo narrowed his eyes and pondered for a moment. Suddenly he walked towards a shop at the side and kicked open the door, circling around inside. Everyone inside was already dead. Be it men or women, old or young, most of them died in their sleep in the exact same manner as the night watchman outside. By the time Su Zimo returned to the long street, Lung Ro and the others had just walked out of the other houses with grim expressions and lingering fears. They're all dead. Little Fatty swallowed his saliva. Even though the 5 of them were cultivators and there were even 4 Foundation establishment cultivators, they had never experienced something like this before. Moreover, if they were not wrong, the people in the entire ancient city were most likely dead. Su Zimo quickly sketched out an image in his mind. Last night, Linfeng City was still as peaceful as ever. Almost everyone in the ancient city was asleep, and the night watchman was walking on the streets when misfortune befell him. No one was spared. Most of them died in their sleep. The entire city had at least 100,000 people. In a single night all of them had died. Lu Yongrong said in a low voice, "It must be someone from the demon sect." Yes, the people of the demonic sect are cruel and ruthless. They would resort to any means necessary. This way of death is clearly not caused by the cultivation techniques of the righteous path. Guanjin nodded his head. Suddenly, Su Zimo asked, "What did the disciples of the sect who discovered the spirit mine say in their letters?" Little Fatty replied, "It's nothing much. It's just that a spirit mine has been discovered in the southern suburbs of Linfeng City, and is currently being mined. It should be done in about 2 days. This junior brother said that he discovered some cultivators near the spirit mine, and was worried that someone would take the risk. Therefore, he asked the sect to send a few Foundation establishment cultivators as reinforcements." After he said that, Little Fatty suddenly realized something and asked with widened eyes, "Bro, are you trying to say that the culprit of this tragedy is trying to steal our sect's spirit mine?" "That's very likely." Su Zimo nodded his head. "It's too much of a coincidence for this to happen right after the spirit mine was discovered near Linfeng City. What should we do then? Are we still going to the spirit mine?" Little Fatty asked. Su Zimo said in a low voice, "Send a letter to the sect first and tell them that there's a change in the situation. The few of you have expended quite a bit of spirit chi along the way. It's best for you guys to recover first before investigating the spirit mine. Junior brother Su, you're too weak. If you're afraid, don't follow us." Before Su Zimo could finish his sentence, he was interrupted by Lu Yongrong's cold laughter. Guanjin glanced at Su Zimo from the corner of his eyes as well. His eyes were filled with mockery as he said leisurely, "Junior brother Su, since you're so worried, why don't you hurry back? I've long advised you not to follow us, Fufu." Su Zimo frowned. Suddenly, Lung Ro said, "I agree with junior brother Su's suggestion." As she said that, she took out a paper crane from her storage bag and wrote a few lines of words on it using her spirit chi. Releasing the paper crane, it flew into the skies and disappeared in the blink of an eye. When he saw that, Lu Yongrong consoled her, "Junior sister Lung, don't worry. Within the territory of the Great Zhou dynasty, there's no cultivator who would be so blind as to lay their hands on the spirit mine of Misty Peak." That's right. Guanjin was very calm as he analyzed. This is only an inferior-grade spirit mine and it's mostly filled with inferior-grade spirit stones. It's not very attractive to Foundation establishment cultivators. Even if someone has designs on it, they're merely chi refinement warriors and nothing to fear. The spirit chi within inferior-grade spirit stones did not have much of an effect on Foundation establishment cultivators. If Foundation establishment cultivators wanted to raise their cultivation, they would require middle-grade spirit stones. At the realm of perfected Jindan, they would require superior-grade or even supreme-grade spirit stones. In reality, what the two of them said made sense. However, Su Zimo had a feeling that this matter was not as simple as it seemed. Let's go. Let's head to the spirit mine and everything will be clear. Waving his hand, Lu Yongrong summoned his flying sword and led the way. Guanjin followed closely behind while Little Crane carried Su Zimo and Linghu. Before long, the five of them arrived at the spirit mine. Arriving at the dark entrance of the spirit mine, Lu Yongrong paused in his tracks and turned back. Junior brother Guan and I will walk at the front. Junior brother Su is the weakest, so he'll stand in the middle. Junior sister Lung and little Fatty will bring up the rear. No one had any objections to that arrangement. The entrance of the cave was narrow and Little Crane and Linghu could not enter. They could only guard the entrance. Su Zimo could tell that even though Lu Yongrong appeared nonchalant earlier on, he was now cautious. Lu Yongrong summoned his flying sword and hovered it in front of his chest. Two spirit patterns shone on it. It was a middle-grade flying sword. The five of them headed deeper into the spirit mine. They had not walked far when a strange sound came from the front, as though a huge flock of something was flying over. A faint red glow could be seen. Lu Yongrong focused his gaze. It was a flock of pitch-black crows. However, their eyes shone with a strange red glow. Squat down and let them pass. Lu Yongrong lowered his body and everyone behind him did the same. A flock of blood-eyed crows sped over their heads without stopping. Lu Yongrong heaved a sigh of relief and shrugged his shoulders. Pretending to be relaxed, he turned around and said with a smile, "In places like spirit mines, these feathered beasts often appear. It's very normal. Ignoring them is a waste of spirit energy." Right then, Su Zimo felt a sense of danger and hollered, "Watch out!" Swash! A sword beam flashed at an extremely fast speed and arrived before them instantly. At that moment, the blood-eyed crows had just flown past and everyone was at their most relaxed state. By the time Lu Yongrong heard Su Zimo's warning, it was already too late. Chapter 143. Poof! There was a crisp sound and there was a flash of blood. Lu Yongrong had just turned around when his head was pierced by a flying sword and he died on the spot. The flying sword did not stop there and continued to stab at the few people behind. Su Zimo was the first to bear the brunt of it. Su Zimo's spirit perception had long warned him. He whipped out his cold moon saber immediately and slashed at the incoming flying sword heavily, smashing it down. The speed of the sword was way too fast. It was obvious that it was not a chi refinement warrior. If Su Zimo wanted to use his flying sword to defend, he would have to release a sword formation. However, it would take a long time to set up a sword formation, and he would not be able to deal with the sudden situation before him. Lu Yongrong's blood splattered on Su Zimo and Guanjin. Apart from Su Zimo, the remaining three people were stunned on the spot. Their eyes filled with horror. Even with Lung Ro's temperament, she looked flustered at this moment. Nobody could imagine that a person who was talking and laughing with them earlier on had turned into a corpse in the blink of an eye. Swash! Swash! Two more sword lights flashed, targeting Su Zimo and Guanjin. Guanjin stood rooted to the ground in a daze. He did not even crush the talisman in his palm right away. Su Zimo reached out and pulled him behind him, hollering, "Hurry and retreat!" Clang! Clang! Su Zimo slashed twice with his backhand and deflected the two incoming flying swords. The power of those two swords was not weak. The person who attacked was at least at early stage Foundation establishment. There was a change in the situation. Lu Yongrong and Guanjin's previous speculations were all invalid. There were at least 3 Foundation establishment cultivators in this spirit mine. Furthermore, the 3 of them did not care about Misty Peak at all. They were merciless and used killing moves the moment they attacked. It was only at this moment that Guanjin and the other 2 reacted. Guanjin crushed a protection talisman right away and a light screen shrouded the surroundings. Following that, Lung Ro and Little Fatty retreated outside rapidly. The sound of clothes fluttering could be heard from the depths of the cave. From the sound of it, there were quite a number of people. When the people inside saw that their flying swords could not kill Suzimo and the others, they had already chased over. Suzimo retreated while retrieving a sanguine bow. Long before the Five Peaks face-off, Suzimo had already turned the cold moon saber and sanguine crystal bow into inferior-grade spirit weapons. In the blink of an eye, 3 arrows was already. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. 3 streaks of cold light entered the darkness of the cave entrance, and the sound of sharp arrows piercing through the air rang out. Ah! Ah! 2 where 2 of the arrows was blocked, the other was. Everyone. Someone in. In that narrow cave, there was not much space for cultivators to dodge, and Suzimo's arrows caused quite a bit of damage. Sprinting at full speed, Suzimo and the others saw the light of day again before long. 2. The group of blood-eyed crows that just now had flown above their heads were surrounding Little Crane and Linghu, attacking them relentlessly. Little Crane was a spirit demon after all, and could still protect itself against the attacks of the blood-eyed crows. However, Linghu did not know how to fly and was already riddled with injuries, howling on the spot and struggling to defend himself. Frost wind. When Lung Ro saw that, she conjured hand seals and pointed into the air with a soft holler. A chilling gust of wind blew through the air and swept past the blood-eyed crows. Many of them were covered in a layer of frost and fell to the ground one after another, disintegrating into pieces. They were already dead. That was the might of spirit arts. Thanks to Lung Ro's help, Little Crane managed to break out of the encirclement. Panting slightly, it could not help but have a look of fear in its eyes. It had spent most of its time in the sect and had never seen such a bloody scene. Get on, Little Crane, and leave this place for now, Suzimo said hurriedly. Ha 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 ha. Right then, a series of arrogant laughter sounded from the depths of the cave. A group of people walked out of the cave. The person in the lead wore gray robes and declared loudly, "None of you are leaving today. All of you shall stay here." Late-stage foundation establishment. Little Fatty's pupils constricted as he exclaimed. The gray-robed cultivator who spoke was at late-stage foundation establishment. Among them, the only mid-stage foundation establishment, Lu Yongrong, had already died at the entrance of the spirit mine. Not only that, there was an endless stream of cultivators walking out of the cave. At a single glance, there were more than 30 of them. The most frightening thing was that all of them were foundation establishment cultivators. Apart from the gray-robed cultivator who was at late-stage foundation establishment, 9 of them were at mid-stage foundation establishment and the rest were at early-stage foundation establishment. None of them were Qi refinement warriors. It's over. Guanjin looked at the 30 or so foundation establishment cultivators surrounding them. His face was pale and his heart was filled with despair. Little Fatty wielded his gigantic axe in one hand, and his flying sword in the other with a nervous expression. Lung Ro's flying sword hovered in front of her. Although her expression was cold, her palms were sweaty as well. Of the 4 people present, Suzimo was the only one who was relatively calm as he surveyed his surroundings. We're cultivators from Misty Peak. Who are you people? Guanjin took a deep breath and asked with a strong front. Fufu. The gray-robed cultivator in the lead chuckled and raised his brow mockingly. So what if you're from Misty Peak? Yesterday, a Misty Peak disciple was blind and was killed by me. Indeed, the disciple who sent the message was already dead. Back when Lu Yongrong died in the cave abode, Suzimo had already realized that today's matter was definitely not going to end well. Still holding on to a glimmer of hope, Guanjin pretended to be weak and said, "Fellow Taoists, you guys are only after this spirit mine. We from Misty Peak can just give it up. Why must you be so ruthless? Furthermore, this spirit mine is only an inferior grade spirit mine. It's useless to us, Fufu." Guanjin forced a laugh. An inferior grade spirit mine? The gray-robed cultivator shook his head and sneered. Correction. This is a middle-grade spirit mine. Ah! Guanjin's expression changed. He finally realized why all the people present were foundation establishment cultivators. If it was a middle-grade spirit mine, it would be extremely attractive to foundation establishment cultivators. If they had known beforehand that this was a middle-grade spirit mine, the disciples sent by Misty Peak would definitely be experts among the inner sect disciples, and might even be led by legacy disciples. Su Zimo did not say anything the entire time and watched coldly from the sidelines. He observed carefully and saw that the 30-odd Foundation establishment cultivators before him were dressed differently. Furthermore, they did not have any identity badges. It was clear that they were itinerant cultivators. What was it that gathered these itinerant cultivators to fight over this spirit mine? The gray-robed cultivator before him was probably not qualified. Even though a late-stage Foundation establishment cultivator was strong, the others would not take the risk and offend Misty Peak because of him. Guanjin forced himself to remain calm and said in a deep voice, "Fellow Taoists, to be honest, we've already sent a message to the sect. Our cultivators will be here soon. Fufu, by then you'll already be a bunch of dead people." Before Guanjin could finish, he was interrupted by the gray-robed cultivator. The gray-robed cultivator chuckled. "Furthermore, by the time Misty Peak cultivators arrive, we'll already be long gone. Ha ha ha." The surrounding Foundation establishment cultivators roared in laughter. The gray-robed cultivator stared at Guanjin's expression with a strange look in his eyes as he asked with a smile, "Also, fellow Taoist, haven't you noticed anything wrong with your body?" Chapter 144. When he heard that, Guanjin's expression changed starkly and his body trembled slightly. Su Zimo glanced sideways and saw that Guanjin's cheeks were drying up at a visible speed as wrinkles appeared. It was as though all the blood in his body was being sucked away by an invisible force in an instant. "Ah!" Guanjin roared and released his spirit energy with all his might. However, he could not stop this strange situation. Turning around, Guanjin looked at Su Zimo and the other two. His eyes were filled with fear as his pupils turned grayish-white and dull. This was exactly the same as how the mortals died in Linfeng City. "Fufu." Guanjin extended his arm, as though he wanted to say something. However, a strange sound came from the depths of his throat. The little fatty jumped in fright and subconsciously took half a step back. Nobody attacked Guanjin at all. However, in the blink of an eye, he had turned into such a state. It was clear that he was doomed. This was way too sinister. Little Fatty felt a chill run down his spine as he panted heavily to calm himself down. Su Zimo furrowed his brows slightly. He took a closer look and noticed that there were faint green spots on the skin of Guanjin's palm that emitted an evil aura. Back in Linfeng City, Guanjin's palm had come into contact with the corpse of a night watchman. If that was all, it was enough to cause the death of a Foundation establishment cultivator. Such methods were truly frightening. If one was careless, they might fall for it. The surrounding Foundation establishment cultivators watched this scene calmly, as if they had already expected this outcome. Even though Lung Ro looked cold on the surface, she could not bear to see Guanjin's helpless expression. She took out a few elixirs from her storage bag and wanted to feed them to Guanjin. She did not know what was going on with Guanjin's current state either. However, he was her senior brother after all, and she could not leave him in the lurch. Just as Lung Ro was about to step forward, someone tugged at her arm and pulled her back. "Don't go." Su Zimo's voice sounded beside her ears. With a thud, Guanjin collapsed to the ground, no longer breathing. Lung Ro froze in place. A dark green ball of light floated out of Guanjin's body and flew into the depths of the spirit mine. A cold glint flashed through Su Zimo's eyes as he lamented internally. There should be someone else in the depths of the spirit mine. That person is the murderer of Linfeng City. The gray-robed cultivator said with a strange smile, "Oh, you're quite protective of the fairer sex. Beauty, if it wasn't for this brat pulling you back just now, you would also be a dead man now." Lung Ro was shocked. Although her cultivation base was higher than Su Zimo's, she had never experienced any life and death experiences. Seeing her two senior brothers die tragically, she couldn't help but lose her composure. Realizing this, Lung Ro looked at Su Zimo gratefully. The gray-robed cultivator rubbed his chin and said lecherously, "But that's good as well. It would be a pity if a beauty like you were to die. TSK, I just happen to be lacking a maid to warm my bed. I think you're pretty good looking." Ha ha ha. The group of Foundation establishment cultivators at the side roared with laughter. Swoosh swoosh. Right then, a gust of wind came from the entrance of the spirit mine as another large flock of blood-eyed crows swarmed out. Like locusts, they covered half the skies in the blink of an eye and loomed over everyone's heads. Little Fatty felt his scalp tingle as he gulped and asked softly, "Bro, what should we do?" Lung Ro looked at Su Zimo as well. At that moment, the two of them had already subconsciously treated Su Zimo as their backbone, and had even forgotten that their cultivation realms were higher than Su Zimo's. "There's no choice." Su Zimo shook his head and replied indifferently, "We can only kill them all." Lung Ro and Little Fatty's eyes dimmed. Lung Ro sighed internally. They're all Foundation Establishment cultivators. Apart from 9 mid-stage Foundation Establishment cultivators, there's even a late-stage Foundation Establishment cultivator. Su Zimo is only a Qi refinement warrior. What can he do? Be it Lung Ro or Little Fatty, both of them thought that Su Zimo was prepared to die and was merely making a casual remark. Lung Ro bit her red lips gently and said softly, "I'll try my best to hold back more people with my talisman later on. You guys ride on Little Crane and find a chance to kill your way out." Little Crane looked at the dense crowd of blood-eyed crows in the skies and cried continuously. It flapped its wings and was prepared to attack at any moment. Although the blood-eyed crows were not strong, they had the advantage in numbers. Once Little Crane was entangled and bitten, it would not be able to unleash its full strength. Ling Hu was on the ground and could not help either. Right then, Su Zimo suddenly withdrew the sanguine crystal bow from his storage bag, nocked an arrow and nocked it. The entire action was as smooth as flowing water, as though he had practiced it countless times. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. 3 sharp arrows were shot towards the crowd and arrived before them in the blink of an eye. Initially, the 30-odd Foundation Establishment cultivators in the surroundings had the intention to tease him. Most of their attention was on the 2 Foundation Establishment cultivators, Lung Ro and Little Fatty. Who would have thought that a Qi refinement warrior would make the first move? It was a calculated move. The 3 arrows pierced the throats of the 3 early-stage Foundation Establishment cultivators accurately, causing blood to splatter. The 3 of them were filled with confusion. Even at their final moments, they could not believe that they had died under the bow and arrows of a Qi refinement warrior. "It's him!" someone in the crowd exclaimed. Previously in the spirit mine, Su Zimo had used his bow and arrows to kill 2 people. Therefore, the Foundation Establishment cultivators recognized him immediately. Swash! 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 The 30-odd Foundation Establishment cultivators summoned their flying swords at the same time. Spirit lights flashed continuously and sword chi was eerie. Su Zimo hollered softly, "Don't just stand there. Attack!" Lung Ro and Little Fatty summoned their flying swords and talismans hurriedly and scattered them towards the surrounding crowd. The light of talismans shone brightly and all sorts of spirit arts collided, causing deafening booms to fill the air. "Caw-caw!" Little Crane cried out and soared into the air, charging towards the blood-eyed crows in the skies to kill them. Little Fatty hollered and charged towards an early-stage Foundation Establishment cultivator with his gigantic axe, wanting to kill that person on the spot with his melee combat strength. However, there were many people on the other side and their flying swords were constantly attacking. Little Fatty could not close in at all and was surrounded in the blink of an eye, barely defending himself. The gray-robed cultivator did not move and merely stood outside with his hands behind his back, watching coldly. There was no suspense in this battle, and he did not have to make a move. On the other side, Su Zimo had already put away his sanguine crystal bow. Even though the bow and arrows were sharp, it was difficult for them to succeed when the Foundation Establishment cultivators were prepared. 6 flying swords hovered before his chest and streaked through the air, leaving behind sword scars. Buzz! A gigantic hexagonal formation pattern shone in a bedazzling manner. Su Zimo released the hexagonal sword formation the moment he attacked. Given the current situation, there was no point in using the tripartite sword formation. Sword formation? The gray-robed cultivator's expression changed and a strange look flashed through his eyes as he murmured softly, "That Qi refinement warrior is a sword formation master?" An early-stage Foundation Establishment cultivator had his eyes on Su Zimo right from the start and secretly summoned his flying sword, stabbing towards the back of Su Zimo's head. Just as the flying sword was about to pierce Su Zimo's head, the latter dodged from the spot in a strange manner with agile movements. That person's expression changed. Just as he was about to turn his flying sword and continue chasing after Su Zimo, a gigantic hexagonal sword formation descended and crushed towards him. Poof! Blood flashed. That person was sliced into two by the hexagonal sword formation. Chapter 145. Although the Foundation Establishment cultivator had many tricks up his sleeves, he was unable to unleash them and was slain by Su Zimo's sword formation in a single move. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The hexagonal sword formation released streams of sword chi one after another, helping little Fatty repel the many flying swords and rescuing him. In that short period of time, little Fatty already had an additional wound on his body. It's fine, my skin is tough. Bro, be careful. Don't worry about me. Without turning back, little Fatty shouted and continued to charge forward. Lung Ro had indeed displayed the strength of a disciple of a major sect. Although she did not cultivate any secret skills of the sect, she was able to defend against the attacks of 9 mid-stage Foundation Establishment cultivators with her talismans. Of course, it was clear that the 9 of them were not using their full strength either. They were merely playing a game of cat and mouse, taunting Lung Ro with vulgar words as they fought on their flying swords. Lung Ro was unmoved and was not in danger for the time being. On the other side, more than 10 early-stage Foundation Establishment cultivators had already shifted their attention to Su Zimo and were attacking him with all their might. Flying swords tore through the air and spirit arts exploded wildly. No matter how strong the hexagonal sword formation was, it could not defend against the strength of so many Foundation Establishment cultivators and was on the verge of collapse in the blink of an eye. Haha! One of the Foundation Establishment cultivators burst into laughter. Let's see how long a puny chi refinement warrior like you can last. Roar! Before he could stop laughing, a black shadow darted out from the side and bit his throat, causing fresh blood to spurt out. It was Ling Hu who had seized the opportunity to kill an early-stage Foundation Establishment cultivator. Although Ling Hu was only a spirit beast, if a Foundation Establishment cultivator were to get close to him, they would be doomed as well. That was also the reason why Dai Yu had once told Su Zimo that it was easiest for demon cultivators to kill opponents above their level. Beast, how dare you behave so atrociously? A few Foundation Establishment cultivators cursed and released spirit arts, causing the surrounding spirit chi to rumble and smash towards Ling Hu viciously. With Ling Hu's current strength, there was no way he could withstand the power of spirit arts. Squinting his eyes, Su Zimo dodged the incoming flying swords and flung out the hexagonal sword formation. He arrived before Ling Hu and blocked a few spirit arts. Boom! There was a loud bang. The spirit art collapsed, and Su Zimo's hexagonal sword formation could no longer hold on, unable to take shape again. The 6 flying swords were scattered on the ground, their radiance dim. Ling Hu was quick-witted. He took advantage of this opportunity to slip behind Su Zimo and glared fiercely at the dozen or so Foundation Establishment cultivators. Brat, the spiritual chi in your body has already dried up. An early Foundation Establishment cultivator sneered. Although it had only been a short time since the start of the battle, Su Zimo had blocked too many flying swords and had consumed a lot of spiritual energy. At this time, he really didn't have much left. Let's see how you can continue being arrogant. Die! A Foundation Establishment cultivator conjured hand seals and pointed at Su Zimo. A fireball the size of a fist was formed and streaked over. Even in midair, the air was already crackling from the heat. Su Zimo's eyes lit up and he suddenly reached out, grabbing the incoming fireball. You must have a death wish. The Foundation Establishment cultivators could not help but sneer when they saw how Su Zimo dared to defend against a spirit art with his bare hands. Slowly channeling his bloodline, Su Zimo's palm flickered with a dense, blazing flash of lightning. What's that? The power of thunder. The pupils of many Foundation Establishment cultivators constricted as they exclaimed. Piak! The fireball was crushed by Su Zimo's palm, and its spiritual chi dissipated into nothingness. The expressions of the cultivators changed when they saw that. The gray-robed cultivator frowned as well, looking at everything in disbelief as he muttered to himself in confusion, thunder art? Could he be a Foundation Establishment cultivator and not a chi refinement warrior? Using his spirit-peering art, the gray-robed cultivator scanned Su Zimo's body once more. That's right, he's at level 9 chi condensation. Could he have cultivated some sort of concealment technique? No. The gray-robed cultivator shook his head again. Why didn't I sense any spirit chi when he released his thunder art? The gray-robed cultivator would never have guessed that the source of Su Zimo's thunder art came from his bloodline. Although Su Zimo's spirit chi was indeed depleted, the power of thunder in his bloodline was still present. Caw-caw. Right then, little crane in the skies was in danger time and time again. Its body was already riddled with wounds from the blood-eyed crows as it cried out anxiously. Even though Senior Crane did not say anything, Su Zimo knew that the reason why Little Crane could follow him out was because Senior Crane trusted him. But now that Little Crane was in danger, Su Zimo released the power of his bloodline with all his might without hesitation. There was a faint sound of waves rumbling from within his body that shook one's heart. Right in front of everyone, Su Zimo's body expanded and his entire body expanded. His green robes burst and his entire body was filled with lightning that crackled chaotically. As though he was possessed by the god of thunder, Su Zimo's eyes were filled with killing intent and his aura was frightening. What? At that moment the gray-robed cultivator's expression changed starkly. He finally realized that something was amiss. Pointing to the skies, Su Zimo's eyes were filled with killing intent as he hollered, "Instant thunder!" Snap! The first thunderclap exploded. An incomparably resplendent thunderbolt struck the blood-eyed crows, snaking like a snake and spreading in a bedazzling manner. One after another, the blood-eyed crows were electrocuted to death and fell from midair like a black rain. Many of the Foundation establishment cultivators present were shocked by the deafening sound of thunder. The 9 Foundation establishment cultivators that were attacking Lung Ro stopped instinctively. Lung Ro seized the opportunity to catch her breath. She was drenched in sweat and her spirit chi was almost depleted. Little Fatty seized the opportunity to charge in front of an early-stage Foundation establishment cultivator. Swinging his gigantic axe, he cleaved that person into two and fresh blood splattered all over his body. The power of the thunder art was so strong that it almost exterminated all the blood-eyed crows in midair. Little Crane was invigorated. The remaining blood-eyed crows were no longer a threat to it. Right then, Su Zimo pulled out a long saber that shone with a cold glint from his storage bag. With a cold glint in his eyes, he strode forward and smirked at the Foundation establishment cultivators opposite him. The battle has only just begun. With that single step, he covered a distance of 20 feet and arrived before the many Foundation establishment cultivators instantly. Poof! Poof! Su Zimo slashed in reverse and the two of them merely felt their vision blur. Before they could react, 2 gigantic heads were tossed high into the air with blood spewing everywhere. Ah! The remaining Foundation establishment cultivators were so scared that their faces turned pale. Exclaiming, they retreated instinctively. Do you think you can escape? Su Zimo chased after them with his saber. Like a tiger in a flock of sheep, he slashed left and right, causing flashes of blood to appear continuously. Lung Ro and Little Fatty were dumbfounded. Against Su Zimo's saber, the early-stage Foundation establishment cultivators were like fish on a chopping block, unable to retaliate at all. Even if they summoned flying swords, talismans and even spirit arts, they were all sliced apart by Su Zimo's saber. Even with lesser mastery of the marrow cleansing section, Su Zimo's strength was enough to kill early-stage Foundation establishment cultivators. Furthermore, he had even integrated the Thunder Marrow Cleansing Sutra into his body back in Thunderclap Valley. This was a suppression in terms of strength that did not require any technique. Even the spirit arts of early-stage Foundation establishment cultivators could not match the power of Su Zimo after he released his bloodline. Chapter 146. Seeing that Su Zimo was on a killing spree and no one could stop him, the gray-robed cultivator could no longer sit still. With a holler, he burst forth with the full might of a late-stage Foundation establishment cultivator and summoned a middle-grade flying sword. Stabbing towards Su Zimo's back, the 2 spirit patterns on the sword shone brightly, emitting a mysterious glow with a chilling aura. The sword was extremely fast and if it was Lung Ro or Little Fatty, they would not have been able to escape unscathed. As for Su Zimo, after killing someone, it was as though he had eyes on the back of his head. Without even turning back, he tapped the ground and dodged the fatal sword. When the gray-robed cultivator saw that, his expression was unchanged and he was not surprised at all. He could already tell that Su Zimo was a body-tempered cultivator and was extremely agile. It was unrealistic for him to want to take down this person in a few moves. Everyone retreat. Try your best to distance yourself from him. The gray-robed cultivator controlled his flying sword to chase after Suzimo while shouting, "If you can't, try your best to soar into the air on your flying swords. Don't let him get close to you." Suddenly, Suzimo laughed and strode forward. Exerting strength in his legs, he burst forth with divine steed fleeting, leaving a series of afterimages behind him. Confusion. Suddenly, Suzimo reached out and a ball of thunder burst forth from his palm, exploding in front of everyone with a blinding flash and deafening rumbling thunder. Sudden thunder and confusion were both thunder arts of the Void Thunder Manual. Instant thunder was a killing technique with considerable lethality and a huge area of effect. Confusion, on the other hand, was a support-type spirit art with almost no lethality. It made use of the power of thunder to confuse the five senses of the opponent, mainly to block their hearing and vision. The many Foundation establishment cultivators on the other side merely felt their vision blur, and their ears rumble endlessly. The next moment Suzimo had already closed in. In melee combat no one was a match for Suzimo. Blood flashed continuously and in the blink of an eye, the few Foundation establishment cultivators on the other side were already dead. At this point in the battle, all the early-stage Foundation establishment cultivators among the 30-odd Foundation establishment cultivators were dead. At this moment Lung Ro, who was in mid-air, let out a cry of surprise. The amulet on her body shattered with a bang. Then, Lung Ro was hit in the stomach by a palm of spiritual energy. She flew out and spat out a mouthful of blood. Her face became even paler. Little Fatty's shoulder was also pierced by a flying sword. He fell to the ground, cold sweat flowing down. It was the gray-robed cultivator who had taken the opportunity to attack. Although he did not take their lives, Little Fatty and Lung Ro were clearly unable to continue fighting. The gray-robed cultivator was very smart. He saw that the power of an early-stage Foundation establishment cultivator could no longer suppress Suzimo, so he took the initiative to deal with Little Fatty and Lung Ro. With that, the gray-robed cultivator could regroup and coordinate with the other 9 mid-stage Foundation establishment cultivators to attack Suzimo in full force. Suzimo stood in front of Lung Ro and Little Fatty, holding his saber horizontally in front of his chest. His eyes were filled with killing intent. Against the gray-robed cultivator and 10 other Foundation establishment cultivators, he did not show any signs of fear. Looking at Suzimo's back view, Lung Ro felt conflicted. This mission was supposed to be undertaken by her, Little Fatty, Lu Yongrong and Guanjin. Suzimo was not qualified to participate. However, if not for Suzimo, she and Little Fatty would have been dead by now. Little Fatty was filled with emotions as well. Initially, he wanted to let Suzimo out for a breather. However, he did not expect to encounter something like this. 2 of his senior brothers died tragically and he and Lung Ro were severely injured as well. They could not help at all. Everyone, use your flying swords, talismans and other methods to suppress him. Wait for an opportunity to release your spirit arts and injure that man severely. The gray-robed cultivator was extremely decisive as he instructed the remaining 9 mid-stage Foundation establishment cultivators to stand in different directions and spread out. Swash! 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 One after another, flying swords tore through the air with many talismans in between. Narrowing his gaze, Suzimo gripped his cold moon saber tightly with both hands. With a long howl he swung his arms left and right to block. Suzimo was able to fight against any sword, talisman or spirit art used by a mid-stage Foundation establishment cultivator with his bloodline power without being disadvantaged. However, the gray-robed cultivator was at late-stage Foundation establishment. Suzimo's marrow cleansing section was only at lesser mastery. Even after fusing with the Thunder Marrow Cleansing Sutra, his strength was still inferior. If it was a one-on-one, Suzimo could make use of his various techniques to close the distance between the 2 of them before slaying the gray-robed cultivator. But now, with 9 mid-stage Foundation establishment cultivators as the gray-robed cultivator's helpers, the 10 of them were able to restrain Suzimo on the spot. It wasn't that Suzimo could not break through. However, the moment Suzimo left, Lung Ro and Little Fatty who were behind him would be killed on the spot. In the face of mid-stage Foundation establishment cultivators, Ling Hu was no longer of much use. Clang! 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 The sound of the cold moon saber clashing against the flying swords could be heard continuously as sparks flew everywhere. If they had not witnessed it with their own eyes, it would be hard to imagine that 10 Foundation establishment cultivators were ganging up on a level 9 Chi refinement warrior. Everyone hold on. That lad must be hiding a secret body tempering technique on him that allowed his physique to be so strong. After we kill him, that secret body tempering technique will be ours. The gray-robed cultivator shouted once more. The remaining 9 mid-stage Foundation establishment cultivators were invigorated and their blood boiled as they attacked even more viciously. Lung Ro and Little Fatty sat on the spot, only feeling the flashes of swords and sabers before them. The sounds of metal clashing could be heard continuously. However, right from the beginning they were not injured. Su Zimo had blocked everything for them. During this period of time, Su Zimo had no choice but to exchange a few blows with the gray-robed cultivator. He was on the losing end and his blood was shaken while his teeth ached. Little Fatty could tell that Su Zimo was in a predicament and could not help but shout, "Bro, don't bother about us. Leave first." Lung Ro pursed her red lips and did not say a word. Naturally, she could tell that if not for her and Little Fatty, even the 10 Foundation establishment cultivators might not have been able to stop Su Zimo. Ha ha ha. When the gray-robed cultivator saw that the outcome was set, he could not help but laugh. "Lad, let's see how long more you can last." The current situation was clear. Su Zimo was in a passive position. If he was careless, not only would he not be able to protect Lung Ro and Little Fatty, he would be injured as well. As time passed by, Su Zimo's stamina was gradually depleted, and it was only a matter of time before he was defeated and died. In reality, Su Zimo was extremely calm at the moment and had been observing the fight between Little Crane and the blood-eyed crows in the skies the entire time. Due to the might of thunder earlier on, there were not many blood-eyed crows left. The remaining ones were almost all hunted down by Little Crane and could not pose much of a threat. Su Zimo needed Little Crane's help. In such a situation, only Little Crane's strength could be of help. Just as the gray-robed cultivator's laughter ended, Little Crane finished off the last few blood-eyed crows and looked down, meeting Su Zimo's clear eyes. Su Zimo nodded and Little Crane understood. Because he channeled his bloodline with all his might earlier on, Su Zimo's green robes had already burst apart, revealing a thin golden silk armor underneath. Suddenly, Su Zimo tore off the golden silk armor and threw it on the ground. Chapter 147. Everyone had already noticed Su Zimo's golden silk armor, but they did not take it to heart. There were no spirit patterns on the golden silk armor. It was merely a pseudo-spirit weapon. Now that the gray-robed cultivator saw Su Zimo rip off the golden silk armor and toss it on the ground, he was stunned for a moment, not understanding the meaning behind that action. The next moment, the gray-robed cultivator's pupils constricted and his expression changed. After ripping off the golden silk armor, Su Zimo seemed to have transformed into a different person. Suddenly, he charged forward and swung his cold moon saber, deflecting the incoming flying swords as he sped towards the gray-robed cultivator. He was too fast. In fact, he was twice as fast as before. A black shadow flashed by like a phantom. In the blink of an eye, Su Zimo arrived before the gray-robed cultivator with a torrential killing intent. With a flip of his palm, he slapped the gray-robed cultivator's head. Piak! The gray-robed cultivator's head exploded and he fell backward stiffly, not understanding what had happened even in death. That golden silk armor was the shattered Khanate spirit weapon. The mystic gold silk armor. Wearing the mystic gold silk armor was equivalent to carrying a heavy object. That was the reason why Su Zimo had not displayed his true strength the entire time. Now that he was free of the burden, Su Zimo was much more relaxed and his speed increased exponentially. Caught off guard, the gray-robed cultivator was killed on the spot. By the time the other 9 mid-stage Foundation establishment cultivators wanted to attack again, Little Crane had already seized the opportunity to land on the ground. Carrying Little Fatty, Lung Ro and Linghu, it soared into the air. The coordination between the man and Crane was flawless. In the blink of an eye, Su Zimo and the other 9 mid-stage Foundation establishment cultivators were the only ones left alive on the ground. The 9 of them were pale and looked at Su Zimo, who was closing in step by step with fear in their eyes. Prior to this, the 9 of them had never imagined that more than 30 Foundation establishment cultivators would be killed by a level 9 Chi refinement warrior. Swash! Su Zimo's figure vanished from the spot and a series of afterimages appeared. The saber beam was accompanied by a flash of blood. In the blink of an eye, another 3 people died. 2 of them flew into the air on their swords, wanting to leave. Su Zimo squatted down slightly, and with a boom 2 deep pits appeared on the ground. Su Zimo leaped into the air and arrived first. While he was still in the air, he slashed down the 2 Foundation establishment cultivators. For left, Su Zimo swatted away 2 flying swords and dashed forward, crashing into a person's chest and instantly exerting his strength. This person's eyeballs protruded out and were bloodshot. His entire chest caved in, and the sound of bones cracking could be heard from within his body. When his entire body collapsed to the ground, he was already dead. Su Zimo had long since left. He caught up with another person and his blade flashed again. There were 2 people left. The 2 of them realized that they couldn't escape Su Zimo's pursuit, so they turned around and sped towards the entrance of the spirit mine. Su Zimo was in hot pursuit. Just as the 2 of them were about to escape into the cave, Su Zimo's feet trembled and the ground shook with a boom. The person behind was already scared out of his wits. His legs gave way and he staggered to the ground. The other person had already escaped into the cave and disappeared. And no, it's not about me. See, that wasn't my idea. It was him. The Foundation establishment cultivator lying on the ground was pale, and his voice trembled as he tried to explain himself incoherently. Who is he? Su Zimo's gaze was cold as he questioned. I don't know. The person shook his head. However, he looked towards the entrance of the spirit mine instinctively with a hint of wariness in his eyes. Su Zimo pondered for a moment before continuing. Everyone in Linfeng City was killed by the people in the cave, right? Yes. The Foundation establishment cultivator nodded hurriedly. What's his cultivation? Just as the Foundation establishment cultivator was about to speak, his expression changed and green spots appeared on his face. Suddenly he gave Su Zimo a sinister smile. When he saw that smile, Su Zimo's hair stood on end. Without hesitation, Su Zimo retreated immediately. Bang! There was a dull thud. Just like that, a person who was still alive earlier on exploded right in front of Su Zimo's eyes. Flesh and blood splattered everywhere as a ghastly green ball of light floated into the spirit mine. Right then, Little Crane saw that the battle on the ground was over and descended from the skies with Lung Ro and Little Fatty. Junior brother Su, are you alright? Bro, are you alright? Almost at the same time, Lung Ro and Little Fatty asked. A hint of panic flashed through Lung Ro's eyes before returning to normal. I'm fine. Shaking his head, Su Zimo replied with a frown. No one knew what he was thinking about. After a moment, Su Zimo stroked Little Crane's head and said, Silly bird, you guys head back to the sect first. It's not good to stay here for long. It would be best if you could bump into cultivators from the sect who are here to provide reinforcements along the way. Caw-caw. Little Crane cried out and urged Su Zimo to hurry up so that they could leave this place together. You guys go ahead first. I'll head back later. Su Zimo shook his head and rejected. Bro, you're not going to barge into the spirit mine again, are you? Little Fatty asked in disbelief with widened eyes. Su Zimo remained silent. Lung Ro and Little Fatty exchanged glances and could see the seriousness in each other's eyes. Junior brother Su, let's head back together. Lung Ro said. The person in the spirit mine might have a huge background and we don't know his strength. Furthermore, his methods are so sinister. There's no need for us to take the risk. We'll just let him have the spirit mine. That's right. Little Fatty added, furthermore, we've already sent a message to the sect and the seniors of the sect will arrive soon. We can't be sure who the spirit mine belongs to. Bro, there's no need for you to take the risk. I've got to head in and take a look. Su Zimo's gaze was resolute as he said in a deep voice, this is a middle-grade spirit mine. That person shouldn't be perfected Jean Dan. If he's still a Foundation establishment cultivator, given my strength, I'll be able to escape unscathed even if I can't defeat him. That person won't be able to hold me back. There were some things that Su Zimo did not explain to Little Fatty and Lung Ro. When he saw the tragedy in Linfeng City, The first thing Su Zimo thought of was the capital of Yan country and his elder brother Su Hong. Against such power, mortals truly had no way of resisting and could only be slaughtered. That person had descended upon Linfeng City the day before yesterday, and none of the living beings in the ancient city were spared. If he were to head to the capital of Yan country one day, his elder brother and the others might suffer the same fate and die an unnatural death. This was their final chance. By the time the seniors of the sect arrived, that person might have already left. Su Zimo was worried that if he were to let that person off today, he would regret it one day. Furthermore, there had to be an explanation for the hundreds of thousands of lives in Linfeng City. Little Fatty was about to speak when he was interrupted by Su Zimo. You guys are injured. There's no need to follow me in. Lung Ro said. We'll wait for you outside then. 2 hours. Su Zimo pondered for a moment and said, if I'm not out in 2 hours, leave this place immediately. Pausing for a moment, Su Zimo said to Little Crane, silly bird. Carry everyone further away. If you see any strangers walking out of the cave, leave immediately and don't turn back. Little Crane nodded hurriedly and flapped its wings, its eyes filled with worry. Su Zimo picked up his flying sword from the ground and tossed the mystic gold silk armor into his storage bag. Pretending to be relaxed, he smiled. There are so many storage bags. Hurry and collect them. We'll split them secretly when we return to the sect. As he said that, Su Zimo walked into the spirit mine and disappeared into the depths of the dark cave. Chapter 148. Wielding his saber, Su Zimo traversed through the dark mine, not daring to move too quickly. A long time later, Su Zimo came to a stop as his vision cleared up. The next moment, Su Zimo witnessed a shocking scene. There were more than 10,000 muscular men kneeling on the ground in circles. In the middle of those men was a pile of spirit stones the size of a mountain that emitted extremely rich spirit chi. Those muscular men were dressed plainly and had fearful expressions. They should be mortals who were here to mine for spirit stones. An extremely handsome young man sat on top of that pile of spirit stones. His pitch-black hair fluttered without any wind and his eyes were closed while his arms were slightly spread apart. One after another, a ghastly green air current floated out from the heads of the 10,000 men and converged into the handsome man's body endlessly. The faces of those men were shriveling at a visible speed and their eyes were dull. It was as though their essence blood was being sucked dry instantly. The Foundation establishment cultivator who escaped into the spirit mine earlier on had already turned into a dried corpse at the feet of the handsome man. This was the murderer of the tragedy in Linfeng City. Su Zimo used his spirit-peering art to scan the man. Perfected Foundation establishment. Su Zimo was secretly shocked. His strength could not even match late-stage Foundation establishment, let alone someone at Perfected Foundation establishment. He could not take this man head-on if he wanted to kill him. He could only make use of various techniques to close the distance as much as possible. Although the strength released by a Perfected Foundation establishment was strong, his physique was definitely not as strong as Su Zimo's. This was Su Zimo's only chance. Suddenly, the handsome man opened his long and narrow eyes. His pupils were a sinister ghastly green. Oh, a chi refinement warrior? There was a hint of surprise in the handsome man's voice. He then sniffed with an intoxicated expression. Not bad, not bad. The essence of your flesh is even richer than the 100,000 people in Linfeng City combined. Fiend, hand over your life. Su Zimo sneered and leaped up. Lightning crackled in his palm as he hollered softly, Thunder Spear. A long spear formed from lightning appeared out of nowhere and pierced towards the handsome man. The handsome man exclaimed softly, Thunder technique? A mere chi refinement warrior actually knows spirit spells? Oh! As he approached, a look of understanding flashed across the handsome man's eyes. He smiled and said, I know. The source of the thunder spell's power doesn't come from your dantian, but from your bloodline. With just a glance, the handsome man revealed the secret of Su Zimo's bloodline. Facing the incoming lightning spear, the handsome man smiled and flicked his finger. A green light shot out. The two forces collided, and the two forces continued to corrode each other, emitting an ear-piercing sound. The Thunder Spear was the move with the strongest killing power in the Void Thunder manual. But now it was broken by the handsome man. Su Zimo's expression didn't change. At this time, he had already arrived below the pile of spirit stones. Then he jumped up and rushed up. Whoosh! The handsome man formed a seal with one hand, and the green light in his eyes intensified as he pressed down. A huge green palm descended from the sky, almost blocking Su Zimo's line of sight. Su Zimo didn't dare to fight it head-on and retreated rapidly. The palm suddenly shattered in midair, turning into streaks of green light, as though they were small green snakes that had a life of their own. They coiled around Su Zimo. In terms of spirit spells, this handsome man was many times more brilliant than the previous 30 over Foundation establishment cultivators. Su Zimo didn't dare to fight it head-on. He could only continue to dodge and run around the pile of spirit stones. The many green snakes behind him were hot on his heels. At this moment, Su Zimo was already trying his best, but he still couldn't shake off the many small green snakes that were chasing after him. All of a sudden, Su Zimo turned around and slashed at the green snakes that were chasing after him. Poof! 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 3 green snakes were sliced into 2 on the spot. However, the remaining green snakes swarmed forward and coiled around the cold moon saber. The originally cold and sharp edge of the blade instantly dimmed. Su Zimo suddenly abandoned his saber and used the plow heaven stride, releasing a torrential force. He climbed up the pile of spirit stones in 3 steps and arrived before the handsome man. Even without the cold moon saber, Su Zimo's close combat strength was still terrifying. There were too many killing moves in the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness. Any one of them was enough to kill the handsome man in front of him. Boom! Su Zimo flipped his palm and slammed it down, as though he wanted to tear the vast land apart. A bone staff suddenly appeared in the handsome man's palm. It was crystal clear and made of white bones. There was a skull at the top that emitted an evil aura. The handsome man chanted a few strange syllables and suddenly reached out with the bone staff, pressing it against Su Zimo's palm. Bang! The power of the earth-rupturing palm was released. The handsome man's body trembled and his palm cracked. He almost lost his grip on the bone staff. Right then, the skull at the top of the bone staff suddenly opened its mouth as though it was alive. 2 beams of light shot out from the holes of its eyes and it bit Su Zimo's wrist. Su Zimo's expression changed. The pain from his wrist was still bearable. However, Su Zimo could clearly feel that the bloodline in his body was being drained by an external force. If this carried on, Su Zimo would probably die from the depletion of his bloodline like those who died around him. Rumble! Boom! Su Zimo let out a long howl and channeled the power of his bloodline with all his might. A rumbling sound of a tsunami was released from his body in a terrifying manner. The power of his bloodline surged and burst forth, almost causing the bone staff to explode. The handsome man narrowed his eyes and channeled his spirit energy with all his might as well. A ball of cold light shot out from the bone staff. The skull at the top of the bone staff was still biting Su Zimo's wrist tightly, swallowing mouthfuls of fresh blood. The originally pure white skull was now faintly turning blood red. The handsome man's eyes danced with excitement as he burst into laughter. What a pure power of bloodline! I really want to know how a chi refinement warrior like you managed to cultivate such a strong bloodline. The melee combat between the 2 of them seemed slow, but in reality, it happened in the blink of an eye. Su Zimo lost the initiative and did not have time to think. He reached out with his right hand and grabbed at the handsome man's head. Although there was no longer any demonic chi in his bloodline, Su Zimo's palm was no different from the claws of a spirit demon. Even rocks would be reduced to dust with that single swipe. The handsome man had complete control of the situation. Unhurriedly, he conjured hand seals and hollered softly, "Blood curse!" A green ball of light appeared in front of the handsome man's chest. It spun continuously and grew in size, blocking the 2 of them. Su Zimo's right hand fell into the ball of light. It was as though it was stuck in a swamp and could not move an inch. It was completely restricted. Su Zimo's expression finally changed. At that moment, Su Zimo could clearly sense waves of weakness coming from his body. If this continued, his blood essence would be completely devoured in the time it took to brew a cup of tea. Chapter 149. If your bloodline was any stronger, I wouldn't have been able to restrain you today. What a pity. The handsome man smirked sinisterly. Suzimo realized that as well. If he had attained greater mastery of the marrow cleansing section, he could kill late-stage foundation establishment cultivators with ease. Coupled with the thunder marrow cleansing section, his strength would definitely be comparable to a perfected foundation establishment cultivator. Even the bone staff of the handsome man might not be able to bite through his flesh. However, at that moment, a sense of helplessness rose in Suzimo's heart. His left wrist was bitten tightly by the skeleton on the bone staff and half of Suzimo's body was numb, and he was almost powerless. On the other side, Suzimo's right hand was enveloped by a dark green ball of light and was motionless. Even though the handsome man's face was right behind the ball of light, Suzimo did not have the strength to pierce through it. Furthermore, Suzimo's right hand was corroded by that strange power and his flesh was starting to rot and fall off. It was a terrifying sight. Behind the ball of light was the smug smile of the handsome man. Right then, the handsome man's smile froze and his gaze froze, as though he had seen something strange. Suzimo's gaze landed on the ball of light between the two of them as well. Within the dark green ball of light, the flesh on Suzimo's right hand had already fallen off completely, revealing a scarlet bone palm. The bones were crystal clear and burned with fine flames on the surface. It was like the most beautiful treasure in the world. The fingertips of the bone palm were as sharp as knives. It did not seem like the palm of a human. An extremely terrifying aura spread out and the dark green ball of light shattered. In the face of that aura, the handsome man felt as insignificant as an ant and his heart stopped beating instantly. What is this? The handsome man's pupils constricted violently. At the same time, Suzimo felt a new power surge into his body from his right hand. His blood seemed to be boiling and spewing flames. Kill! Suzimo hollered and reached out with his blood-red bone palm, grabbing towards the handsome man's head. The handsome man's expression changed and he hurriedly moved his white bone staff in front of him, wanting to block the blood-red bone palm. Piak! Suzimo only made a light grab. The bone staff of the handsome man was directly broken. Puff! In the next moment, Suzimo's bone palm descended and crushed the handsome man's head. The great circle of foundation establishment had perished. Suzimo stood rooted to the ground, looking at his right hand in disbelief. The handsome man's bone staff was no less hard than a middle-grade spirit artifact. But just now it had been easily broken by his right hand. Was this his right hand? Suzimo could clearly feel that this blood-colored bone palm was not his original palm. This blood-colored bone palm exuded a terrifying aura, as if it could destroy everything in the world. Suzimo suddenly recalled something. Back in the Tsonglang mountain range, he had fought with many cultivators from the Joyful clan. His right hand was almost crippled and turned into a mush. After that, when Suzimo woke up, his whole body was intact, without a single wound. This blood-bone palm must have been attached to his wrist by Daiyu at that time. However, what was the background of this blood-bone palm? Why did it cause Suzimo's heart to palpitate? At that moment, there was a clue to many of his previous doubts. The reason why he could cultivate a level 3 spirit fire right away was because of this blood-bone palm before him. The reason why Suzimo's right hand did not change the entire time when he was demonized was because his strength was not enough to activate the blood-bone palm. Even though he did not know the secrets of the blood-bone palm, Suzimo knew that many of the abnormalities in his body were related to it. This must be one of the 3 items that Daiyu left for him. Suzimo looked around and heaved a sigh of relief when he did not discover anyone else. The blood-bone palm was clearly not a human's palm. If it was exposed, Suzimo would not be able to explain himself. Suzimo put away the handsome man's storage bag and rummaged through it. He took out a grade 2 elixir, the muscle-growing elixir, and swallowed it. The muscle-increasing elixir combined with Suzimo's strong self-healing abilities allowed a thin layer of flesh to grow on Suzimo's right hand. Although it had not fully recovered, it had already covered the blood-colored bone palm. Still worried, Suzimo took out another piece of cloth and wrapped it around his right hand. After pondering for a moment, Suzimo waved his hand and kept all the middle-grade spirit stones in his storage bag. He was here for the spirit stones and naturally would not be soft-hearted. Looking at the tens of thousands of mortals who were still kneeling and had already died, Suzimo sighed internally. His eyes were filled with pity and emotions. If not for Daiyu, Su Zimo would be no different from these mortals and could only be slaughtered by cultivators. Why? Why did these mortals not have spirit roots? Senior Crane once said that whether one had a spirit root or not was a person's fate, and no one could change it. Without a spirit root, it meant that one could not cultivate. Could these people's endings be their fate as well? Su Zimo felt indignant. He felt indignant for the hundreds of thousands of innocent people who died in Linfeng City, and for the tens of thousands of simple men before him. If these people could cultivate, they might not have died today. He had Dayu to change his fate and plant a spirit root for him. However, who could change their fates for these people before him? Su Zimo sighed once more and left the place. Outside, Little Crane and the others hid far away, watching the spirit mine without daring to let down their guard. After 2 hours, a person walked out of the cave. Lung Ro and the others focused their gazes. It was Su Zimo. Little Crane carried Lung Ro. Little Fatty and Ling Hu over hurriedly as Little Fatty cheered in the skies. "How is it, bro? Are you alright?" Little Fatty was the first to jump down and asked in concern. Su Zimo shook his head. Lung Ro's gaze landed on Su Zimo's right hand as she asked softly, "Your hand?" "It's fine, just a small injury." Su Zimo naturally would not tell the truth. Right then, a streak of light sped over from the distance at an extremely fast speed and arrived before them in the blink of an eye. It was a gigantic spirit vessel. The side of the spirit vessel was etched with the image of a mountain peak. On the deck of the spirit vessel stood a group of perfected Jin Dan. The 5 people in the lead were the 5 peak masters of Misty Peak. The 5 peak masters leaped down from the spirit vessel and swept their gazes. When they saw more than 30 Foundation Establishment cultivator corpses strewn across the battlefield, they could not conceal the shock in their eyes. Su Zimo and the other 2 had not expected that Lung Ro's message would alert the perfected Jin Dan of the sect as well. "Greetings to the 5 first seats, greetings to the elders." Su Zimo and the other 2 bowed. The 5 peak masters nodded and asked with grim expressions. Little Fatty described everything from the beginning to the end, including how they discovered the abnormality in Linfeng City, and how Su Zimo barged into the spirit mine alone. At the end, the disheveled old man glared at Su Zimo with a reproachful look. "Alright, let's return to the sect first." Right then, when Xian came out of the spirit mine and waved his hand, bringing Su Zimo and the other 2 onto the spirit vessel. Chapter 150. Ethereal Main Peak, Ethereal Palace. The 5 peak masters brought Su Zimo, Lung Ro and Little Fatty here and recounted the incident of the spirit mine in Linfeng City to the Patriarch in detail without leaving out anything. Su Zimo and the other 2 left. Patriarch Ling Yun closed his eyes in deep thought and asked after a while, "What do you guys think?" When Xian replied, "Such cruel methods should be the work of someone from the fiend sections. Patriarch, you mustn't be careless." The other 4 peak masters nodded as well. "Pass down my orders. Before the sect competition, all sect disciples should avoid heading out as much as possible. If they head out, they must be accompanied by at least 20 perfected Foundation Establishment disciples." Ling Yun continued, "Make arrangements for the funerals of Lu Yongrong and Guan Jin. Also, reward Lung Ro and Little Fatty with spirit stones and elixirs." As for Su Zimo, the disheveled old man said hurriedly, "Patriarch, if not for this lad, even Little Crane wouldn't have been able to return, let alone Lung Ro and Little Fatty. We've all gone over to take a look." The battlefield was extremely tragic and more than 30 Foundation Establishment cultivators died under this lad's saber. "Impart the Ethereal Foundation Establishment to him," Ling Yun said. When he heard that, the disheveled old man's eyes lit up in joy as he bowed hurriedly. "That would be for the best. I'll thank Patriarch on behalf of Su Zimo." The Ethereal Foundation Establishment was one of the 3 secret skills of the sect. In the Qi condensation realm, the requirements for cultivation techniques were very low. Any cultivation technique would allow one to cultivate a sea of Qi, and as long as their spirit roots were good enough, they would be able to enter the Foundation Establishment realm. However, in the Foundation Establishment realm, there were requirements for cultivation techniques. Foundation Establishment was divided into 4 levels: early stage, mid-stage, late stage, and perfected. At perfected Foundation Establishment, there was a meridian opening. The so-called meridian opening referred to the use of spirit energy, to open up the 8 extraordinary meridians. Every time a meridian was opened, a cultivator's strength would increase. Although a foundation establishment cultivator with 8 open meridians and a foundation establishment cultivator with 1 open meridian were both considered to be at the peak of the foundation establishment realm, there was a world of difference in their strength. Normally, if one could open up 4 of the 8 meridians, there would be a great chance of forming the Jin Dan. If he could open up 5 meridians, his chances of forming his gold core would be even higher. If he could open all 8 extraordinary meridians, he would definitely become a Jin Dan. This seemed simple, but it was actually extremely difficult. Many foundation establishment cultivators might not even be able to unlock 4 meridians in their entire lives, and could only form their cores by force. Most of them would fail in their attempt to form their cores and die in depression. If he could cultivate a superior foundation establishment cultivation method, his chances of opening his meridians would be much higher. Ethereal foundation establishment was a superior foundation establishment cultivation technique. Cultivators who cultivated this secret skill would be able to unlock at least 4 meridians at the perfected foundation establishment stage. Of course, in the entire Great Zhou dynasty, there had only been 1 foundation establishment cultivator who had unlocked all 8 meridians in the past 1,000 years. The most recent foundation establishment cultivator to do so was that monster incarnate who walked out of Misty Peak 1,000 years ago. It was almost impossible for all 8 meridians to be unlocked. There was no foundation establishment cultivator who purposely pursued unlocking all 8 meridians. Normally, one could attempt to break through to the Jin Dan realm, as long as 4 meridians were unlocked. Of course, it was undeniable that the more meridians were unlocked, the stronger one would be, and the quality of the Jin Dan formed would be different as well. Therefore, in the inner sect, there were some middle-aged foundation establishment cultivators who were in their 40s but were stuck at perfected foundation establishment. All of them wanted to unlock as many meridians as possible, and were not in a hurry to form their cores. However, the lifespan of a foundation establishment cultivator was only slightly more than 100 years. After 50 years of age, one's essence, chi and spirit would deteriorate. If one could not unlock their meridians in the past, it would be even more difficult in the future. Therefore, most people who were stuck at perfected foundation establishment until they were 50 years old at most would attempt to form their Jin Dan regardless of how many meridians they unlocked. The amazing thing about ethereal foundation establishment was that it could ensure that a cultivator could unlock at least 4 meridians. That meant that they were already halfway through the threshold of forming their cores. Furthermore, with that foundation, cultivators who were extremely talented would be able to unlock even more meridians. After all, there was once a cultivator who unlocked all 8 meridians in Misty Peak, who was invincible among foundation establishment cultivators in the Tianhuang North region. In the Ethereal Palace, just as the 5 Peak Masters were about to leave, Patriarch Ling Yun added, "Right, don't spread this news." The 5 Peak Masters were stunned for a moment before nodding in agreement. After the 5 of them left, a beautiful red-haired woman suddenly appeared in the palace. Ling Yun stood up and cupped his fists, asking in a deep voice, "Senior, have you heard of a similar demonic technique that can absorb a cultivator's essence blood?" The red-haired woman shook her head with a grim expression. Ling Yun frowned and murmured, "Could it be someone from the 7 fiend sects? If it's someone from the 7 sects, Misty Peak won't be easy to deal with. If we don't deal with it properly, we might be wiped out." "It's not someone from the fiend sections." The red-haired woman shook her head and said with certainty. Ling Yun's expression relaxed slightly. Just as he heaved a sigh of relief, the red-haired woman continued, "However, that person's background is probably not weaker than the 7 fiend sections. In fact, it might even be stronger." Could it be? As though he had thought of something, Ling Yun's pupils constricted and he did not continue. The red-haired woman nodded and said, "That pair of green eyes should be from the forbidden grounds of Tianhuang mainland." Pust! Ling Yun gasped and was shocked. After a long time he asked, "How did a being from the forbidden grounds escape?" "I don't know either." The red-haired woman sighed. "Chaos is brewing in Tianhuang mainland. Senior, your lifespan." Ling Yun could not help but ask worriedly, "I won't be able to last long. 100 years at most." The red-haired woman said, "Over the years, True Fire Sect, Iridescent Clouds Palace, Southern Mountain Sect and Azure Frost Sect have all coveted Misty Peak. Even some of the smaller sects are tempted. When I die, Misty Peak is on the brink of death. If no one in the sect enters the void reversion realm and becomes a void reversion in the next 100 years, the lineage of Misty Peak is probably going to end. Senior. Suddenly, Ling Yun knelt on the ground and looked at the red-haired woman in silence with a guilty expression. The crane was the spirit beast of the founder master of Misty Peak, and had protected the sect for thousands of years. It was equivalent to a void reversion, and was the only void reversion in the sect. All these years, if not for the protection of Senior Crane, Misty Peak would have been destroyed multiple times. There's no need for that. There are thousands of Jining Jinjuan, and no one can enter the void reversion realm without a powerful spirit refinement technique. You don't have to blame yourself either. The red-haired woman reached out to help him up and said softly, "Don't worry. I'll protect Misty Peak until the end. At least, I won't let him down for what he entrusted me back then." Ling Yun sighed. Actually, the batch of disciples last year had decent potential. For example, Feng Haoyu, Lung Ro, Su Zimo and Little Fatty had limitless futures. It's a pity. Ling Yun did not continue. It was a pity that those people would not be able to enter the void reversion realm within 100 years, and help the sect tide through this calamity. Chapter 151. Because the 5 Peak Masters had given a gag order to Su Zimo and the other 2, no one in the sect knew of the details of the battle in Linfeng City. Everyone only vaguely heard that Lung Ro and the others were ambushed when they were out and 2 inner sect disciples died tragically. It was only later that perfected being Jin Dan arrived and rescued Lung Ro and the other 2. Immediately after, the sect passed down a series of orders for the sect disciples to avoid going out as much as possible. As such, the sect became tense. Although most people did not know the reason, they felt a sense of danger and chose to cultivate in seclusion. It was the same for Su Zimo. Previously, Su Zimo had just left Thunderclap Valley and was lacking spirit stones. That was why he followed Lung Ro, Little Fatty and the others out. Now that Su Zimo had sufficient spirit stones, he had already started cultivating maniacally, wanting to catch up with the cultivation realm that he had lost half a year ago. In the cave abode, Su Zimo resumed his normal cultivation routine. During the day, he would absorb spirit stones and refine elixirs. After that, he would consume perfect-grade elixirs to raise his cultivation realm. At night, he would channel the tiger leopard thunderous roar and continue refining his marrow to produce fresh and powerful blood. The effect of the marrow cleansing was obvious. Even his skin, flesh, tendons and bones would be strengthened during the process. Every night when he woke up, a thin layer of black dirt would appear on the surface of Su Zimo's body. Those were the impurities in his body. Cultivating both immortality and demonic at the same time, both realms were improving steadily. With sufficient spirit stones and a non-stop cultivation, Su Zimo reached perfected chi condensation after a month. When he was at level 9 chi condensation, Su Zimo had already formed a chi si in his dantian. Now that he was at perfected chi condensation, the chi si changed once more, as though it was dyed with a red glow. Flames burned on it, beautiful and exuding a powerful aura. Although he did not spar with anyone, Su Zimo dared to guarantee that he could crush all chi refinement warriors of the same level at chi condensation. Su Zimo had just breathed a sigh of relief when the sound of fluttering clothes came from outside the cave. Soon someone knocked on the door. Su Zimo frowned. The sound of these footsteps sounded very unfamiliar. Usually, there were not many people who came to his cave residence to look for him. Most of them were Little Fatty, but this footstep was very light. It was obviously not Little Fatty. Su Zimo waved his sleeve and the door of the cave opened. A fragrant wind blew over, and a woman in snow-white clothes stood at the door. Her expression was cold, but there was a trace of nervousness in the depths of her eyes as she looked inside nervously. This woman was Lung Ro. Su Zimo was surprised and quickly got up to greet her. He cupped his hands and said with a smile, "I didn't expect it to be Senior Sister Lung. Come in quickly." "Yes." Lung Ro replied softly and walked in with her head lowered. Given Lung Ro's character, she might not be willing to meet anyone even if they were to visit her. Now that she had taken the initiative to look for a male disciple, if others were to know about this, their jaws would drop. "Is there anything you need, Senior Sister Lung?" Su Zimo asked with a smile. Lung Ro thought for a moment and said, I haven't thanked you for saving me outside Linfeng City a few days ago. I'm here to thank you officially. So that's the matter. Su Zimo smiled and waved it off. It's nothing. I helped to save myself as well. Don't take it to heart. Lung Ro nodded and did not say anything else. She was not good at conversation to begin with, and Su Zimo could not keep asking. The atmosphere suddenly turned cold and awkward. Lung Ro hesitated for a moment and said, Junior brother Su, I've made 2 grade 2 talismans. I'll give them to you as thanks for saving my life. With that, Lung Ro took out 2 talismans from her storage bag and handed them over. However, she lowered her head and did not look at Su Zimo. Su Zimo thought to himself, if I refuse, it'll be even more awkward. With that thought, Su Zimo reached out to receive the 2 talismans and said with a smile, Thank you, senior sister Lung. When Lung Ro saw Su Zimo accept the talismans, her expression relaxed and her tense body gradually relaxed. She raised her head and glanced at Su Zimo before quickly turning to the side. Of the 2 talismans, one was a protection talisman while the other was an attack talisman. Sensing the auras of the 2 talismans, Su Zimo nodded to himself. The 2 talismans should be the strongest grade 2 talismans. It was clear that Lung Ro had spent a lot of effort on them. Su Zimo lamented internally. It's a pity that I can't refine middle grade spirit weapons right now. Otherwise, I'll refine one as a return gift. Right now, Su Zimo could advance to Foundation Establishment realm at any moment. His 6 inferior grade flying swords could no longer keep up with his cultivation. If he wanted to release a sword formation, he would have to refine his own flying swords. But right now, Su Zimo's tempering technique was way too crude. Even with superior materials, the impurities could not be removed and he could not condense a second spirit pattern. This was a huge problem that had to be resolved. The 2 of them chatted casually for a while more before Lung Ro left. Su Zimo took out an elixir from his storage bag. There were 5 patterns carved on it, looking mysterious and profound. A perfect foundation establishment elixir. This foundation establishment elixir was refined after Su Zimo defeated Feng Haoyu during the Elixir Peak face-off. At the thought of Feng Haoyu, Su Zimo could not help but recall how Feng Haoyu stopped him after the Elixir Peak face-off and said some threatening words to him. At that time, it seemed as though Feng Haoyu was merely venting his emotions. However, Su Zimo thought about it later on and realized that this was not as simple as it seemed. Now that he was at Foundation Establishment realm, Su Zimo would inevitably have to face Feng Haoyu once more. He did not know what the latter would do. After all, Feng Haoyu was probably going to be even harder to deal with now that he had experienced a crushing defeat. With that thought in mind, Su Zimo swallowed the Foundation Establishment elixir in a single mouthful. The elixir melted in his mouth and a warm current flowed down his throat, eventually gathering at his dantian and emitting a powerful medicinal effect. Under the influence of the medicinal power, Su Zimo calmed himself down and condensed the sea of qi in his dantian slowly. He was neither flustered nor anxious. As the name suggested, foundation establishment was about laying down one's foundation. If one's foundation was not solid, there was a chance that their future path would be problematic. The scarlet qi sea shrunk continuously. However, the aura it emitted was increasingly terrifying. Just like that, time passed by bit. Su Zimo was in no hurry. For ordinary cultivators, the fastest ones would take less than 2 hours and the slowest 3 to 5 days to establish their foundation. There was almost no one who was as slow as Su Zimo. After a full 100 days, Su Zimo opened his eyes and a glint flashed through them. The qi sea in his dantian had finally disappeared, turning into a scarlet spirit liquid. Spirit qi underwent a qualitative change and transformed into spirit energy. 100 days of foundation establishment. Although those 100 days seemed ordinary, it helped Su Zimo establish an incomparably stable Dao foundation. This day, Su Zimo walked out of his cave abode and summoned his flying sword, heading straight for the main peak of Ethereal Peak. Now that he was at Foundation Establishment realm, he could head to Ethereal Peak to take part in the Inner Sect test. As long as he passed, he would become an Inner Sect disciple of the sect. Chapter 152. The Inner Sect assessment of the sect was relatively easy. It merely tested the disciples' control and understanding of sword kinesis, and whether their foundation was stable. When the auditing elder saw that it was Suzimo, he did not even test him and gave him an inner sect disciple identity badge. Under Little Fatty's lead, the two of them circled around Ethereal Main Peak before finding a cave abode to settle down. Half a day passed in such a short time. The news of Suzimo becoming an inner sect disciple spread through the inner sect before long. Suzimo was about to return to his cave abode and continue his seclusion to cultivate Ethereal Foundation establishment, when a group of people walked over from not far away. They had unfriendly expressions and smirked coldly. The leader was the former disciple of Spirit Peak, Sun Tao, who was knocked out by Suzimo with a single palm strike. After half a year, Sun Tao was already at early-stage foundation establishment. The rest of them were unfamiliar and had different cultivation realms. There were even late-stage foundation establishment cultivators. Before long, they surrounded Suzimo and Little Fatty. Little Fatty smiled and cupped his fists. "Senior brothers, what can I do for you?" "Little Fatty, go away. This has nothing to do with you." Harumphing coldly, Sun Tao looked at Suzimo with a dark gaze and raised his brow. "Suzimo, back then on Spirit Peak, you ambushed me when I was unprepared. That debt has yet to be settled. I won't take advantage of you either. Since we're both at early-stage foundation establishment, let's fight it out in the spirit arena." In reality, even though both of them were at early-stage foundation establishment, one of them had just entered while the other was already at the peak of early-stage foundation establishment. Furthermore, Suzimo had just become an inner sect disciple and had yet to learn spirit arts. On the other hand, Sun Tao had been in the inner sect for a few months and had already mastered many spirit arts. Everyone knew whether it was fair or not, but no one pointed it out. Little Fatty had a strange expression and looked at Sun Tao with a hint of pity. However, he did not point it out either. Suzimo could not be bothered with Sun Tao and merely shook his head. "I'm not interested." Sun Tao's face darkened as he shouted, "Suzimo, it's not up to you today." Suzimo narrowed his eyes and stared at Sun Tao for a while. Suddenly, he smiled and asked, "What do you mean?" "Suzimo, stop pretending." A sect disciple at the side shouted, "If not for the fact that you, a Qi refinement warrior, had implicated Senior Brother Lu and Senior Brother Guan in the spirit mine of Linfeng City, how would they have perished? What nonsense are you talking about?" Little Fatty couldn't help but scold them. He knew exactly what had happened at the spirit mine in Linfeng City, but no one else knew about it. One of them sneered and said, "Although the three of you kept your mouths shut about that matter, we can roughly guess what happened. It must be this Suzimo who dragged the two senior brothers down." Suzy was expressionless as he listened to the criticism of his fellow disciples. This rumor had no basis and was merely the result of a wild guess. Although it sounded ridiculous, many people in the inner sect believed it. There was no way Suzimo would have believed that rumor if someone had not spread it intentionally. Sun Tao sneered. "Suzimo, even if you reject my challenge, from today onwards, many senior brothers will challenge you continuously to seek justice for the two dead senior brothers. Don't even think about cultivating in the inner sect from now on." Suzimo's expression was unchanged as he nodded. "All right, let's go to the spirit arena." For some reason, Sun Tao felt uneasy when he heard Suzimo's nonchalant tone. After all, Suzimo had defeated Feng Haoyu back when he was at the Qi condensation realm. Now that he was at the foundation establishment realm, Suzimo would definitely be even stronger. However, on second thought, Sun Tao realized that Suzimo had just joined the inner sect and had yet to learn spirit arts. How could he compare to Sun Tao? Before long, just as Sun Tao's thoughts were running wild, everyone had already arrived at the spirit arena of Ethereal Peak. Suzimo walked up slowly, calm and composed. Sun Tao summoned his flying sword and leaped onto the spirit arena. Conjuring hand seals with his left hand, spirit energy rippled from his fingertips. His spirit art was already formed. "Haha, today's the day I avenge my humiliation." Sun Tao's heart was set after conjuring his spirit art, and he could not help but laugh gleefully. Suzimo's expression was unchanged as he said indifferently, "Sun Tao, if I can knock you out once, I can do it a second time." Boom! The moment he said that, Suzimo's figure vanished from the spot. A series of afterimages appeared between the two of them. In the blink of an eye, Su Zimo had already arrived before Sun Tao. He did not make use of spirit weapons or spirit energy. It was purely the burst of his physical strength. A tragic, malevolent aura surged over. Instantly, Sun Tao felt as though he was not facing a human, but an ancient ferocious beast. Without time to think, Sun Tao threw out the spirit art he conjured with his left hand and controlled his flying sword with his right, stabbing forward. The distance was too close and there was almost no need for aiming. Rumble. Right at this time, Sun Tao's ears actually heard a burst of shocking sound of waves, surging and surging. Su Zimo's eyes lit up as the power of his bloodline burst forth. Su Zimo punched casually and destroyed Sun Tao's spirit art. Immediately after, he tilted his body slightly and dodged the incoming sword. With a flip of his hand, he slammed it towards Sun Tao's face. This action was exactly the same as what he had done on Spirit Peak. Sun Tao was greatly alarmed. He only felt his vision darken as a shocking force descended. His entire body fell backward uncontrollably. Bang! The back of his head hit the ground and blood flashed as Sun Tao fainted on the spot. It was too fast. Many of the inner sect disciples watching below were not prepared. Both parties merely made contact and Sun Tao had already fainted on the spirit arena. Everyone was stunned on the spot and could not recover for a moment. Right then, Su Zimo turned around and looked at the inner sect disciples below. He said slowly, "Anyone else who's indignant can come up together and I'll take them all." Everyone was in an uproar. The next moment, the inner sect disciples below were enraged and hollered, "Brazen! Brazen!" What did Su Zimo mean by that? He was treating everyone as though they were nothing. A disciple who had just joined the inner sect dared to be so brazen. The inner sect disciples present were all young and impetuous. Who could tolerate that? Little Fatty furrowed his brows in confusion. In reality, after Sun Tao said that, Su Zimo realized that this was the move of the enemy hiding in the dark. He had to take it whether he wanted to or not. As Sun Tao had said, if he did not settle today's matter, he could forget about cultivating properly in the inner sect. And the simplest and most effective way to solve this problem was to intimidate them. Not only did he have to intimidate Sun Tao and the others, he had to intimidate the person hiding in the dark as well. Therefore, not only did Su Zimo have to defeat Sun Tao and the others today, he had to reveal his true strength and crush everything. Chapter 153. Although many disciples were infuriated, they maintained their rationality and did not rush forward. A mid-stage Foundation establishment cultivator was the first to enter the spirit arena and said coldly, "Junior brother Su, aren't you being too arrogant?" Before that person could finish, Su Zimo took 2 steps forward and arrived before him. Without a second word, he raised his arm and drew an arc in the air. His fist was filled with flesh and blood as it crashed down like a gigantic seal. "Ah!" that person exclaimed and crushed a protection talisman hurriedly. Su Zimo's fist smashed heavily against the barrier of the protection talisman, causing it to shake violently. Immediately after, a series of chilling sounds could be heard. Crack! 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 Cracks appeared on the barrier and spread rapidly. A Grade 2 protection talisman was shattered by a single punch from Su Zimo. Scared out of his wits, that person jumped off the spirit arena before Su Zimo could continue punching. His eyes were filled with shock as he retreated hurriedly like a stray dog. Another inner sect disciple grit his teeth and leaped onto the spirit arena, summoning his flying sword right away. 2 spirit lights shone on the flying sword in a bedazzling manner. It was a middle-grade flying sword. On the other side, that person conjured a hand seal and pointed at Su Zimo's feet. One after another, thick vines grew out of Su Zimo's feet. Like venomous snakes, they crawled up his ankles and coiled around him tightly. The flying sword and spirit art descended at the same time in a seamless manner. If it was anyone else, they would not be able to dodge the attack of the flying sword with their bodies restricted. However, Su Zimo's bloodline was way too strong. Unless it was a late-stage Foundation establishment cultivator, even a spirit art released by a mid-stage Foundation establishment cultivator would not be able to trap him. Rumble! Boom! Su Zimo's bloodline rumbled as lightning flashed. When the power of thunder struck the vines conjured by the spirit art, they were electrocuted into nothingness. Swash! At the same time, the flying sword descended and pierced his glabella. Suzimo chuckled and did not dodge. Reaching out, his palm was as soft as a tongue as it rested gently on the incoming sword. Coiling and shaking it, the flying sword obediently fell into Suzimo's palm. However, Suzimo's palm was completely unscathed. The inner disciple's jaw dropped, and his eyeballs almost popped out of their sockets. This kind of method had already exceeded his understanding. Snatching a white blade with bare hands was just a small trick used by martial artists in the pugilistic world. Could only be used against mortals. How could they have ever seen someone capable of snatching a Foundation Establishment cultivator's flying sword with their bare hands? Everyone attacked together. Someone in the crowd shouted. The dozen or so disciples below felt their blood boil as they jumped onto the spirit arena. Good, that's how it should be. Suzimo laughed loudly and took a few steps forward. He directly crashed into the crowd and unleashed the power of his bloodline. With the ferocity of his unparalleled fist, he crushed his way through. Bang 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 bang. Accompanied by cries of pain, the sound of fists colliding could be heard as figures fell one after another. Many people had just entered the spirit arena, and were sent down by Suzimo before they could even stabilize themselves. In the blink of an eye, the spirit arena was littered with people. All defeated. 3 cultivators stood in the distance. Although they were also inner sect disciples based on their identity badges, they had extraordinary auras and were clearly different from others. That's Suzimo, the number 1 of the 4 peaks last year. He's not weak in melee combat. However, he's not very useful. Yes, he won't even have a chance to get close to us. The person in the middle smiled. I heard that there were a few disciples with decent potential last year. Apart from Suzimo, there's also Feng Haoyu and a beauty called Lung Ro. Yes, all 3 of them have a chance to become legacy disciples and reach our status. That's a story for later. Let's continue our seclusion and prepare for the sect competition. When Feng Haoyu saw that, he turned and walked towards his cave abode expressionlessly. The moment he entered and closed the door, he paused in his tracks as though he sensed something. That lad's methods are terrifying. In the spirit mine of Linfeng City, more than 30 Foundation Establishment cultivators died in his hands. There was even a late-stage Foundation Establishment cultivator among them. Suddenly, a hoarse voice sounded from a black figure in a corner of the cave abode. Feng Haoyu was secretly shocked. The disciples of the sect did not know what happened outside Linfeng City at all. Only the 5 peak masters and some elders who went to provide reinforcements knew. Feng Haoyu said, according to what you said, Senior, I can't deal with him given my current methods. Furthermore, I can't kill Suzimo in the sect. Have you learned all 3 secret skills? The hoarse voice sounded once more. Yes. Feng Haoyu nodded. A large part of his mission this time round was for the 3 secret skills of Misty Peak. Record them down for me. No, Feng Haoyu shook his head. The moment the black figure's tone changed, the atmosphere in the cave abode turned tense with a murderous aura. Before learning the secret skills, Ling Yun made me swear an oath that I'm not allowed to spread them. Feng Haoyu explained, I have no choice either. The cave abode fell silent. After a moment, the black figure laughed sinisterly. You're not allowed to spread them? Let's see how long Misty Peak can last. At that time, I'll come personally to snatch away the 3 secret skills. What about Suzimo and the 3 legacy disciples of Misty Peak? Feng Haoyu asked again. Suzimo is still alright. However, the 3 legacy disciples live in seclusion and rarely show themselves. There's no chance for us to make a move. The black figure pondered. Don't act rashly lest we alert them. Before the sect competition, he would find a chance to capture all 4 of them in one fell swoop. Let's see how Misty Peak is going to participate in the sect competition this time round. A cold gust of wind blew and the black figure vanished from the spot, leaving Feng Haoyu's cave abode. As Suzimo had expected, no one in the inner sect came looking for trouble with him after that battle. For the next 2 months, Suzimo stayed in seclusion in his cave abode, absorbing spirit stones continuously to cultivate ethereal foundation establishment and raise his cultivation realm. 2 months later, it was near the end of the year. Suzimo had already cultivated to the peak of early-stage foundation establishment and wanted to head out for a walk after a long period of silence. His main goal was to find a secret manual on weapon refinement. Without it, Su Zimo would not be able to raise his weapon refinement skills. No matter how high his cultivation realm was, his strength would be reduced if he could not release sword formations. Su Zimo left silently without making a sound. The destination of his trip was Chiyu City, an important city in the Great Zhou dynasty where the Sky Treasure Auction House was located. Typically, any city where cultivators gathered would have a Sky Treasure Auction House. However, there were not many Sky Treasure Auction Houses in the Great Zhou dynasty, and Chiyu City was the closest one to Misty Peak. Su Zimo intended to try his luck at the Sky Treasure Auction House. Ever since the battle outside Linfeng City, he still had quite a number of spirit stones left in his storage bag and could use them. Chapter 154. Chiyu City. From afar it was as though a gigantic beast was sprawled on the ground, menacing and terrifying. Even the capital of Yin country paled in comparison. Furthermore, this was merely one of the major cities of the dynasty. One could only imagine how majestic and domineering the capital of the Great Zhou dynasty was. Along the way, the closer they got to Chiyu City, the more cultivators they saw. In the capital of Yin country, there were at most some Qi refinement warriors, and it was rare to even see a foundation establishment cultivator. However, foundation establishment cultivators were way too common in Chiyu City. Traveling on swords, people came and went in an endless stream. In fact, there were even occasional flashes of perfected Jin Dan who was flying without anything beneath his feet. In comparison, Chiyu City was more like a city of cultivators. Although Su Zimo was a disciple of Misty Peak, he did not dare to be arrogant in Chiyu City. In fact, he had already put away his sect badge and found a random inn to stay in. Similar to Sky Treasure Pavilion, the Sky Treasure Auction House was backed by the royal family of the Great Zhou dynasty. Listening to the discussions of the cultivators around him, Su Zimo was even more confident about this trip. It was said that Sky Treasure Auction House was the largest trading market in the Great Zhou dynasty, and was famous. Many rare treasures had been auctioned here in the past, be it spirit weapons, elixirs, talismans, or secret manuals. Everything was available. Of course, the cost of getting what one wanted in Sky Treasure Auction House was extremely high as well. By the time Su Zimo entered the city, it was already evening. After listening for a while in the main hall of the inn, he returned to rest. The next day, Su Zimo woke up early and rushed to Sky Treasure Auction House. Sky Treasure Auction House was divided into an inner and outer house. Most of the items in the outer house were relatively ordinary items that cultivators could purchase with spirit stones or barter. The inner house was where the true auctions were held. All rare items would be officially auctioned in the inner house with fair bidding, and the highest bidder would win. As long as one entered the area of Sky Treasure Auction House, be it the inner or outer houses, no one was allowed to fly. Even perfected Jin Dan was not allowed. That was the rule of the auction house. The crowd was so crowded that their shoulders brushed against each other. There were cultivators from various sects and sections. In fact, Su Zimo even saw a few cultivators from Iridescent Cloud's Palace and Azure Frost sect. After walking around the outer square, Su Zimo's horizons were broadened. He did see a lot of treasures, but unfortunately, he didn't see any manuals on refining and tempering techniques. Su Zimo did not hesitate and walked towards the door of the inner house. Two late-stage foundation establishment cultivators stood guard on either side of the gate. They wore armor and had sharp gazes as they scanned the crowd. Such guards could be seen everywhere in the Sky Treasure Auction House. Even if Zhenren Jin Dan were to cause trouble here, he would be mercilessly suppressed. Su Zimo had just walked up the stairs when he was stopped by two guards. "Please show us your Sky Treasure token," one of them said coldly. Su Zimo was stunned and asked, "You still need a Sky Treasure token?" The other guard explained patiently, "Tokens of different colors have different seating areas in the inner square as well. Bronze tokens are the worst and gold tokens are the best." Su Zimo truly did not know that he had to show his Sky Treasure token to enter the inner square. In reality, the inner square was not a place where anyone could enter. The Sky Treasure token was the only way to prove that someone was qualified to participate in the inner square auction. Otherwise, who knew if they were trying to take advantage of the situation? Furthermore, most cultivators who could obtain a Sky Treasure token would have bought, and sold a certain amount of items at Sky Treasure Pavilion. That was also proof of their identity and strength. At this moment, even Misty Peak's sect token was not as useful as a Sky Treasure token. Su Zimo did have a Sky Treasure token, and it was a Sky Treasure Gold token. However, ever since he found out about Ji Yaoshua's identity, Su Zimo had not used the gold token, worried that it would attract unnecessary trouble. However, given the current situation, Su Zimo had no choice but to take out the Sky Treasure Gold token and hand it over. The guard took a look and could not help but frown when he saw that it was a Sky Treasure Gold token. Typically speaking, given Su Zimo's cultivation, it was already rather rare for someone at early-stage foundation establishment to be able to obtain a Sky Treasure Silver token. Only perfected Jin Dan could obtain a Sky Treasure Gold token. Only perfected Jin Dan was worthy of a gold token. The guard's first reaction was that the Sky Treasure Gold token was fake. Without batting an eyelid, the guard pressed gently in the middle of the Sky Treasure Gold token. His expression relaxed slightly as he nodded to the other person. The Sky Treasure Gold token was real. It was not that there had never been fake Sky Treasure badges before, but none of them had been able to get away with it. The reason for that was that there was a unique mark in the middle of every Sky Treasure badge that could not be replicated by others. The guard knew the authenticity of the Sky Treasure badge with a single touch. That green-robed scholar's background is not simple. The elders in his family dote on him enough to give him a Sky Treasure Gold token when he's only at early-stage foundation establishment. One of the guards muttered to himself and nodded to Su Zimo. He moved aside and handed the Sky Treasure Gold token over at the same time. Su Zimo received the token and it slipped through the guard's hand. Just as it was about to leave his hand, the guard seemed to have sensed something and a cold glint flashed through his eyes as he suddenly grabbed the Sky Treasure Gold token. Something was not right. When the corner of the Sky Treasure Gold token slid past the guard's palm, he had clearly touched a word. The guard snatched the Sky Treasure Gold token back and waved his hand. Instantly, a few more foundation establishment cultivators appeared beside him. They surrounded Su Zimo with a murderous aura and unfriendly expressions. "What's wrong?" Su Zimo frowned and asked. The guard looked at Su Zimo and harumphed. Picking up the Sky Treasure Gold token, he examined it carefully. At the bottom right corner of the Sky Treasure Gold token, there was a word the size of a mosquito. As long as one focused their attention, they would be able to tell that it was the word Shui. The guard handed the Sky Treasure Gold token to another person and his expression darkened. If the word Shui did not exist, the Sky Treasure Gold token would be real. However, if it did, it would be way too fake. This was clearly the token of the Great Zhou Dynasty's third princess. How could it be in the hands of an outsider? Humph! How dare you forge a fake Sky Treasure Gold token? You really don't know what's good for you. Take him down. Another guard shouted decisively after reading it. Hold on. Su Zimo was extremely calm as he said in a deep voice, "Fellow Taoist, what right do you have to say that my token is fake? There's no proof. You've got to give me some evidence." There was no way the Sky Treasure Gold token was fake. Su Zimo wanted to hear what the guard had to say. The guard sneered. "All right, I'll let you know the reason for your death today." Just as that person was about to speak, a commotion broke out not far away as the crowd stirred. Glancing from the corner of his eye, the guard shuddered and revealed a respectful expression. In fact, there was even a hint of intoxication in the depths of his eyes. It was the same for everyone else, forgetting about Su Zimo for the moment. Curious, Su Zimo looked over. Chapter 155. A group of maidservants escorted two women over. The woman at the front had snow-white skin and peerless looks. She had a voluptuous figure and exquisite curves, exuding a mature and seductive charm with every step she took. She had a smile on her face and her every move exuded a graceful aura. It was clear that she had a high status in Sky Treasure Auction House. Beside this woman, there was a young girl in a pink dress. Although her face was covered with a veil, only a pair of beautiful eyes could be seen. When she looked around, it was clear and crystalline. It was simply captivating. The young girl wore a long dress that accentuated her slender figure. Her waist was slender and curvaceous. Both women had their own merits and were rare beauties. Walking side by side, they looked like a pair of sisters. The moment they appeared, They attracted everyone's attention with a fiery passion. Gulping sounds could be heard from the surroundings. It was a spectacular sight. To think that Chief Steward Gu would come to Sky Treasure Auction House in Chiyu City. Chief Steward Gu is truly a beauty of the great Zhou dynasty. Each time I see her, I have an uncontrollable desire to conquer her. I'm willing to sacrifice 10 years of my lifespan if she can give me a night of pleasure. Someone like you wants to be under Chief Steward Gu's skirt? I heard that there was a perfected Jin Dan who had ill intentions and was killed that night. His corpse was hung on the city walls for an entire month. After cultivating the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness, Su Zimo's hearing was far superior to others. Although the discussions were suppressed to the point of being as soft as flies, he still caught them. So it's her. Su Zimo muttered to himself. When he arrived in Chiyu City yesterday, Su Zimo heard many people talking about this woman. Gu Shi, the chief steward of Sky Treasure Auction House. Her background was mysterious, and it was said that even the emperor of the great Zhou dynasty was respectful towards her. At least half of the reason why Sky Treasure Auction House was so famous was because of Gu Shi. Nobody knew about her cultivation. However, for so many years, no one who dared to harbor ill intentions towards her survived. Mysterious, noble, and beautiful. When these words were combined together, Gu Shi became the most famous beauty in the great Zhou dynasty. She could only be admired from afar and could not be touched. After all, the Sky Treasure Auction House in Chiyu City was not the main auction house. Su Zimo did not expect to meet Chief Steward Gu here. Who is that girl in pink beside Chief Steward Gu? She looks very unfamiliar. Nonsense, she's wearing a veil. How can you recognize her? Even though she's wearing a veil, I still feel like my soul has left my body. If I can see her face, I can die without regrets. Many people in the crowd turned their attention to the girl in pink. Su Zimo had used his spirit-peering art to look at the two women earlier on. He could not even detect the cultivation realm of the girl in pink, let alone Gu Shi. It was as if this woman was shrouded in a layer of fog, making it impossible for others to see her clearly. Right then, Gu Shi's gaze landed on Su Zimo. Pausing for a moment, she asked, "What's wrong?" "Chief Steward, this lad forged a fake Sky Treasure gold badge and wanted to get away with it. We discovered him." One of the guards hurried forward and presented Su Zimo's Sky Treasure gold badge with both hands, bowing respectfully. Smiling, Gu Shi accepted the Sky Treasure gold badge casually and looked at Su Zimo with a fake smile. "You look rather delicate, but you've got guts. There's nothing much to say. Let's do it according to the rules and kill this person." Before Gu Shi could finish, her expression changed slightly. Frowning slightly, she brought the Sky Treasure gold badge closer to take a look. After a moment, Gu Shi raised her head and looked at Su Zimo with a scrutinizing gaze with a strange expression. "Auntie Gu, what's wrong?" The girl in pink at the side asked softly when she sensed the strange atmosphere. The girl in pink's voice was seductive and pleasant to the ears. Gu Shi glanced sideways and remained silent. However, a voice sounded in the girl in pink's mind. "This badge should be real, but I don't know how it ended up in this person's hands. Take a look." Only those who had stepped into the nascent soul realm could use this kind of voice transmission technique. The girl in pink received the badge and was slightly stunned when she saw the word Shui at the bottom right corner. In the blink of an eye, she seemed to have thought of something as her lips curled under the veil and her eyes shone with a strange glint. The girl in pink whispered into Gu Shi's ear, "This badge is real. I know who this person is now. Auntie Gu, call him up. I have something to talk to him about." Gu Shi nodded and handed the Sky Treasure gold medallion back. "This medallion is real." "Ah, real." The two guards from earlier were stunned on the spot. This was clearly the badge of the great Zhou dynasty's third princess. If it was real, what was the relationship between this person and the third princess? Don't make wild guesses and gossip. As though she could tell what the two guards were thinking, Gu Shi said coldly. The two guards were shocked and nodded hurriedly. Su Zimo heaved a sigh of relief. The moment he put away the Sky Treasure gold badge, he felt a burning gaze. Gu Shi and the girl in pink were both looking at him. Although the girl in pink was wearing a veil, Su Zimo could almost see her smiling face behind the veil. "Follow me." Suddenly, an unquestionable voice sounded in Su Zimo's mind. It was Gu Shi's. Gu Shi and the girl in pink headed towards the side door of the inner house. Su Zimo hesitated for a moment before following them. Only members of the inner house were qualified to enter through the side door of the inner house. Outsiders could only hand over their Sky Treasure Gold badges and enter through the main door. But now that Su Zimo followed behind Guxi and the girl in pink and entered through the side door, it caused an uproar. Who's that green-robed scholar? Why? Many people's eyes turned red from watching. Someone coughed gently and strode towards the side door as though nothing had happened. However, he was stopped by the guards on the spot. After a fruitless argument, that person could only leave in a huff. After entering the inner house, it was much quieter and the number of people had decreased significantly. Guxi and the girl in pink walked at the front while Su Zimo followed behind calmly. He did not say anything and merely sized up his surroundings. The entire layout of the inner house was like a gigantic funnel, and the surrounding guest seats were divided into 3 regions based on their colors. The seats at the bottom were bronze and those with Sky Treasure bronze badges sat right next to each other without much space to move around. Above the bronze were the silver seats that were relatively spacious. A few more levels up was the gold region. This time around, it was divided into individual rooms that were embedded with beautiful crystals. Although one could not see in from the outside, one could see everything clearly from the inside. Above the gold region, there was a circle of individual rooms that looked even more spacious and majestic from the outside. It was unknown who prepared them for. Beautiful girls stood on both sides of the doors of the uppermost rooms. Chapter 156. Following a green jade staircase, Su Zimo followed Guxi and arrived at the top of the inner house, beside the most spacious room. Come in with me. Guxi looked at Su Zimo and said before entering a room. The maidservant standing on both sides smiled and bowed slightly, looking at Su Zimo with clear respect and envy. In the room there was a row of chairs and a table filled with all sorts of fruits that were filled with spirit chi. It was extremely tempting. Sit anywhere. The girl in pink greeted Su Zimo and pointed to the fruits on the table. Even the perfected Jean Dam below can't eat these things. Su Zimo did not say anything and merely nodded with a hint of caution in his heart. He had long noticed that the reason why the two of them were treating him so strangely was definitely because of the Sky Treasure Gold badge. Previously, Su Zimo had always thought that the Sky Treasure Gold badge given to him by Ji Yaoshua was the most ordinary one. But now it seemed like it was not that simple. Hey, what's your name? The moment Su Zimo sat down, the girl in pink suddenly leaned over and asked in a sweet voice with ripples in her watery eyes. The girl in pink was almost plastered to Su Zimo and her body fragrance wafted over. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat as he leaned back slightly and said in a deep voice, I'm Su Zimo. The moment he said that, Su Zimo felt that something was amiss. After the girl in pink had asked her question, he did not even have to think before he subconsciously blurted it out. Su Zimo felt a sense of trepidation in his heart. This feeling was as though he could not control himself and would answer anything the other party asked. What was even scarier was that the girl exuded a seductive aura. Every frown and smile of hers was enchanting and charming. Even though it was just a casual chat, Su Zimo felt his body heat up and his mind wander. Evil. Su Zimo clenched his fists, and a layer of sweat gradually seeped out of his palms. This girl was already so powerful with a veil on her face. If she were to take off her veil, how powerful would she be? Su Zimo could not stay any longer. He stood up and cupped his hands. Head chief, if there is nothing else, I will take my leave. Guxi didn't say a word. She just looked at the two of them quietly. What's the rush? Didn't you come here to auction something? Just sit here and bid. The girl in pink said. Suddenly, she rolled her eyes and arrived in front of Su Zimo. Raising her head, she asked with a smile, why? Are you afraid? Su Zimo was indeed a little scared, but how could he admit it at this time? Miss, you must be joking. Su Zimo's expression did not change. He looked straight ahead and said indifferently, as a disciple of Misty Peak, I have always been upright. What is there to be afraid of? The reason why Su Zimo brought up his sect was because he wanted to intimidate the other party. No matter what, Misty Peak was one of the 5 major sects of the Great Zhou dynasty after all. Wow! The girl in pink exclaimed with a look of admiration. Misty Peak! One of the 5 major sects. How amazing! Guxi's lips twitched as though she wanted to laugh. However, she held it back. Suzimo could tell as well that the girl in pink was clearly faking it. There was a hint of mockery in her tone, as though she did not care about Misty Peak at all. Suzimo had an embarrassed expression. However, he could not get angry and could only ask instead, "Miss, how should I address you and what sect are you from?" "Me? I can't tell you right now, hee." The girl in pink laughed and blinked her eyes. She looked innocent and charming, making it hard for anyone to feel bad about her. "Do you know what's strange about that Sky Treasure gold badge?" Suddenly, the girl in pink asked. "I don't know," Suzimo shook his head. "Take it out and take a closer look," the girl in pink continued. Ever since he obtained the Sky Treasure gold badge, Suzimo had indeed not taken a close look at it. Now that he was looking at it, he noticed something strange. At the bottom right corner of the badge, there was an exquisite Shui character carved on it. The girl in pink's voice sounded once more. "This is the gold badge of the Great Zhou Dynasty's third princess, also known as the royal family's gold badge. There are less than 10 of them in the entire Great Zhou Dynasty." No wonder. Suzimo's heart skipped a beat. Back then, Ji Yaoshua said that he would get a 50% discount if he shopped at Sky Treasure Pavilion with this Sky Treasure gold badge. At that time, Suzimo was surprised. Wasn't that way too cheap? So, this badge was meant for the descendants of the Great Zhou Dynasty's royal family. "Hey, what's your relationship with the third princess of the Great Zhou Dynasty?" A sly look flashed through the girl in pink's eyes as she asked with a smile. Suzimo shook his head. "Nothing much, we're just ordinary friends." "Who would believe that?" Pursing her lips, the girl in pink teased, "Ordinary friends? Why would the third princess give this badge to you?" Suzimo remained silent. "Hey Suzimo, can you do me a favor?" The girl in pink rolled her eyes and suddenly asked. Suzimo asked, "What is it?" "Help me beat up the bad guys." Raising her fist, the girl in pink said with a stern expression, "Yes, they're all heinous fiends. As a disciple of Misty Peak, you should shoulder the responsibility of eliminating them." "I'm not going," Suzimo shook his head. Suzimo did not care about the bad guys or fiends. He just wanted to stay away from this girl. At the side, Guxi suddenly frowned and released her spirit consciousness, setting up a barrier between her and the girl in pink. She frowned and said, "What are you messing around for? You can't be thinking of getting this kid to accompany you there, right?" "That's right," the girl in pink replied nonchalantly. "Don't go," Guxi advised, "I can't help you there. Among this generation of fiend heirs, none of them are good people. If you provoke them, they might really kill you." Tiske. The girl in pink was somewhat disdainful. "So what if they're fiend heirs? I'm a demoness. Who's afraid of who? If they provoke me, I'll kill them all the same. Besides, haven't I found a helper?" With that, the girl in pink swept her gaze towards Suzimo. "Him." Guxi shook her head and did not continue. However, her tone was filled with disdain. The girl in pink smiled brightly. "I heard from my sister that Suzimo's melee combat strength isn't bad." "It's useless." Guxi shook her head. "The geniuses of this generation of fiend sects are too strong. Notwithstanding the successor of Overlord Palace, Suzimo is nothing compared to the fiend heirs of the other factions. He's just sending himself to his death if he goes there. Your sister has a deep relationship with him. If he dies because of you, your sister will definitely blame you. If he dies, it'll be over." The girl in pink sneered. "It'll save my sister the trouble of thinking about him and even quarreling with father a few times. In my opinion, there's nothing much about this Suzimo. He looks ordinary. I don't know what my sister sees in him." "You've decided?" Guxi asked. The girl in pink nodded and frowned. "However, if he doesn't want to go, I can't hold a knife to his neck and force him to go. There's always a way," Guxi said meaningfully. Chapter 157. What are you planning to buy this time round? After removing the sound barrier, Guxi looked at Suzimo and asked with a smile. "Nothing much, I'm just looking around." Even though he did not know what the two of them were talking about, Suzimo could tell that it had something to do with him. Naturally, he would not reveal the truth foolishly. Smiling, Guxi did not probe any further and changed the topic. "The auction is about to begin." Why don't you sit here? If there's anything you fancy, I might be able to help. Given the difference in status between them and the fact that Gushi had invited him repeatedly, Suzimo made up his mind and thought to himself, since I'm here, I might as well take things as they come. It's not like they can do anything to me. At that thought, Suzimo sat down boldly and picked up the fruits on the table, eating them as though there was no one else around. Through the crystals in front of him, he could clearly see that the seats outside were already filled. It was extremely lively and bustling. Before long, a bell rang and the auction officially began, causing the place to quieten down gradually. A middle-aged man in luxurious robes walked up to the round platform in the middle. Surveying the surroundings, he smiled and cupped his fists. I'm the shopkeeper of Chiyu City's Sky Treasure Auction House. Welcome, fellow Taoists. I hope that everyone can return with a full load today. Hurry and begin. A cultivator who had long since grown impatient shouted loudly. The shopkeeper smiled and did not say anything else. Waving his hand behind him, a beautiful maidservant walked forward with a tray in her hands, swaying her hips. The shopkeeper removed the gauze covering the tray, revealing a flying sword inside. The blade of the sword was like autumn water and shone brightly. There were 3 spirit patterns on it. It was a superior grade spirit weapon. This is the autumn water sword. It was created by the most famous advanced weapon refinement master of the Great Zhou dynasty, Mr. Lien. I believe everyone has heard of it before, so I won't introduce it further. The starting bid for this sword is 2,000 spirit stones, and each bid must not be less than 100. Suzimo was secretly speechless. The auction had just started, and it was already a superior grade spirit weapon. He did not know what else would appear later on. He did not know who this Mr. Lien was either. As though she could sense the doubts in Suzimo's heart, Gushi explained, that person is called Lien Feng and he's from True Fire sect. He's famous because he once refined a supreme grade spirit weapon. In the Great Zhou dynasty, a high-level refiner is considered a rare talent. Out of respect, cultivators who are not familiar with him all call him Mr. Lien. Suzimo nodded. The numerous cultivators outside had already begun to bid. In just a short while, the price of the autumn water sword had already risen to 3,000 spirit stones. Suzimo was not very interested in spirit artifacts. Very quickly, the autumn water sword was sold to a foundation establishment cultivator at the price of 3,700 spirit stones. The shopkeeper smiled in satisfaction. With a wave of his hand, the second item was brought up. Lifting the gauze, there was a jade bottle on the tray. It seemed to contain some kind of pill. This is a Tier 2 pill, low grade. I believe everyone has heard of its name before. It's the Meridian Unlocking Pill. The base price is 5,000 spirit stones, and each increment must be no less than 500 spirit stones. Suzimo's eyes lit up. After foundation establishment cultivators entered perfected cultivation, they had to unlock their 8 meridians. The amazing thing about the Meridian Unlocking Pill was that there was a high chance of unlocking a meridian after consuming it. Of course, the better the quality of the Meridian Unlocking Pill, the higher the chances of unlocking a meridian. Furthermore, it was only effective the first time it was consumed. Even so, that effect was terrifying enough. Once a cultivator unlocked 7 meridians and consumed the Meridian Unlocking Pill, they had a chance of unlocking their 8 meridians. The Meridian Unlocking Pill was extremely famous in the ancient era. Unfortunately, there were not many left and even the recipe was lost. Suzimo was tempted and leaned forward slightly. Gushi's gaze shifted and she noticed Suzimo's slight movement. She said, if you're interested, you can bid here. The maidservants outside will help you spread the word. This was a privilege exclusive to the rooms on the top floor. The rooms were all marked with numbers. For example, Suzimo's room was number 1 and there were 10 rooms like that at the top. The lower floors were occupied by perfected Jin Dan, and there were 90 rooms, numbers 11 to 100. In just a short time, the Meridian Unlocking Pill was bid for 10,000 spirit stones by many Jin Dan perfected beings. That was only an inferior grade Meridian Unlocking Pill. Those perfected Jin Dan perfected beings were definitely not for their own use, and were mostly prepared for their personal disciples. Suzimo took a deep breath of air and gave up on the thought of bidding for the time being. It wasn't that he did not have enough spirit stones, but that he did not fancy the quality of the pill. Su Zimo had obtained quite a number of middle-grade spirit stones from the spirit mine outside Linfeng City previously. Right now he had more than 100,000 of them in his storage bag. "Hey, are you short of money?" The girl in pink blinked and whispered, "If you're interested in anything, I can help you." "There's no need. I have the ability to buy it myself," Su Zimo rejected indifferently. A look of surprise flashed through the girl in pink's eyes as she asked with a smile, "I couldn't tell. You're only at early-stage foundation establishment but you have the ability to buy these things?" Pausing for a moment, the girl in pink rolled her eyes and suddenly asked, "Do you know what kind of spirit stones they're using to bid?" Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat, as he suddenly realized that he had miscalculated something. The bids in the inner house did not mention inferior grade, middle grade or superior grade spirit stones. Subconsciously, he thought that they were using middle grade spirit stones. One had to know that the value of spirit stones of different grades differed greatly. Under normal circumstances, 100 inferior grade spirit stones were equivalent to a middle grade spirit stone. However, 100 middle grade spirit stones were equivalent to a superior grade spirit stone. Of course, there were supreme grade spirit stones above superior grade spirit stones. If the spirit stones mentioned in the inner house just now were superior grade spirit stones, Su Zimo's 100,000 middle grade spirit stones would only amount to slightly more than 1,000 superior grade spirit stones. That was not enough to buy anything, Gushi said from the side. Anyone who has been to the Sky Treasure auction house knows that the transactions in the inner house are all conducted with superior grade spirit stones by default. It's only when supreme grade spirit stones are used that they are emphasized. Su Zimo nodded, looking calm and composed as though he had known about it long ago. However, he was lamenting internally, "Now this is awkward." If anyone else saw Su Zimo's composure, they might not be able to tell anything. However, he could not hide it from Gushi and the girl in pink. What was Gushi's cultivation realm? She saw through Su Zimo's facade with a single glance and smiled faintly. The girl in pink looked at Su Zimo from the side with a mischievous smile. She did not expose him and merely chuckled. Suddenly, the girl in pink felt that this green-robed scholar was rather amusing. Under the gaze of the girl in pink, Su Zimo could not sit still any longer. "I won't be able to buy anything even if I continue staying here. I might as well leave earlier." At that thought, Su Zimo stood up and was about to bid farewell to the two of them when another item from the auction house outside attracted his attention. Chapter 158. The following is a tempering technique for artifact forging, written by a senior artifact forging master. 1,000 years ago, this person was extremely famous in the cultivation world of the Great Zhou dynasty. Unfortunately, he did not manage to advance to nascent soul realm and his lifespan was exhausted. It could be considered a good ending. The shopkeeper kept everyone in suspense before saying slowly, "That person is Mr. Su Zhan. It's him. That person is incredible. I heard that when he was at his peak, he refined dozens of supreme-grade spirit weapons. It's even said that he once refined a perfect spirit weapon. He's extremely powerful and all golden cores want to obtain a spirit weapon from him." Most of the Foundation establishment cultivators present had not heard of this person before. However, there was a commotion in Perfected Jean Dan's room. The shopkeeper removed the gauze on the tray, revealing a thin ancient book. The paper was yellowed and looked old. The shopkeeper said in a deep voice, "This is Mr. Su's personal letter. The starting price is 100,000 spirit stones and each increment must be no less than 1,000. Looking at the ancient book, Su Zimo's eyes were burning. However, his heart was cold. This ancient book was what he needed the most and was also the purpose of his trip. However, he could not afford it given his capabilities. Even if it was 100,000 middle-grade spirit stones, Su Zimo would not have enough spirit stones after a few bids, let alone the starting price of 100,000 superior-grade spirit stones. Indeed, the price of the ancient book rose steadily in this short period of time, and was already close to 200,000. There weren't many people bidding, only a few. For ordinary cultivators, this ancient book might not mean much. However, for weapon refinement masters, this was a priceless treasure. Even if the person who called out the price was not an artifact refiner, he would definitely be related to artifact refining in some way. At this moment, A voice suddenly came from room 77, 250,000. Su Zimo's eyes flickered and his heart skipped a beat. That voice was familiar. It sounded like the disheveled old man. After all, Su Zimo could not be certain based on his voice without meeting him personally. However, it was indeed rare to see the disheveled old man in the sect these days. A series of exclamations could be heard from the seats of the inner house. Previously it was still 200,000, but now it was suddenly raised to 250,000, a total of 50,000 high-grade spirit stones. This was not a small number. The few rooms that had been bidding suddenly fell silent. The shopkeeper smiled and said, "The guest in room 77 is really generous. Of course, this also proves the value of this ancient book. 250,000 spirit stones. Are there any higher bids?" As the shopkeeper of the Sky Treasure auction house, he naturally did not want the price to stop here. As he spoke, he seemed to be casually reminding the other guests. After a short period of silence, a voice came from the room where the price had been called out, 2501. 300,000. Following which, before the manager could say anything, room 77 raised the price to 300,000. This time the crowd was completely stunned. Could the person in room 77 be one of the auction house's own people? That's hard to say. He'll just keep raising the price. There was a burst of discussion in the seats. After waiting for a long time, no one increased the price. The controller could only ask with a smile, "Is no one going to increase the price?" In fact, 300,000 high-grade spirit stones was already enough. It was the limit of the ancient book's value, and it would be inappropriate to increase the price any further. The shopkeeper did not have much hope and said loudly, 300,000 going once, 300,000 going twice, 300,000. I'll bid 310,000. Right then a gloomy voice sounded from room 80. When he heard that, the shopkeeper was overjoyed and said, "Room 80 has raised the price to 310,000. Is there anyone else who wants to increase the price?" Although that was what he said, the shopkeeper's gaze landed on room 77. After a short period of silence, room 77 raised the price again. 320,000. This time, the cultivator in room 77 was clearly much more cautious. It seemed that 300,000 was already the limit of his ability. 330,000. Immediately after, the cultivator in room 80 raised the price without hesitation. The cultivator in room 77 was even more hesitant. Each time he would think for a long time before raising the price. In just a short period of time, the price of the ancient book was constantly rising between the two rooms of the cultivation world, and had already reached 400,000. In reality, the true price of the ancient book was only around 300,000. However, the reason why it was expensive was that there was no market for it. Most tempering techniques were not imparted to outsiders and were difficult to purchase. This time round, it was the cultivator in room 77's turn to speak again. After a long time there was still no sound. Ha 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 ha. Right then a series of arrogant laughter sounded from room 80. A perfected Jean Dan in scarlet robes strode out. He looked at room 77 with a dark gaze and sneered, "Old thing, don't hold on if you can't hold on. Even if you guys at Misty Peak have this ancient book, no one will be able to understand it." When he heard that, Su Zimo no longer had any doubts. Sure enough, the door of room 77 was slammed open, and an old man with white hair and a beard walked out angrily. He looked at the red-robed man and asked loudly, "Sima Ji, are you purposely trying to make things difficult for me? True Fire Sect doesn't lack such tempering techniques at all. Why are you snatching it from me?" "I like it." Sima Ji smiled smugly. "You..." The disheveled old man was speechless. Sima Ji said leisurely, "Old thing, that's 400,000 spirit stones. Can you afford that? Look at how poor you are. Fufu, you're probably going to have to sell everything you have, right?" The disheveled old man's face was livid. As Sima Ji had said, he only had 300,000 superior-grade spirit stones in his storage bag, and that was what he had pooled together with the other 4 peak masters before he arrived. The reason why he dared to bid 400,000 spirit stones was because he had bet everything he had and everything valuable on it. He was bent on obtaining that ancient book, not for himself, but for his disciple Su Zimo. Ever since the Five Peaks face-off last year, the disheveled old man had been wandering around the world, visiting various auction houses in an attempt to purchase a tempering technique. Su Zimo had long been able to refine inferior-grade spirit weapons. However, he was stuck at the tempering stage and could not make a breakthrough. Even though he did not say anything, the disheveled old man was anxious. He felt that he had let Su Zimo down by wasting the child's talent in weapon refinement. It was not easy for the disheveled old man to come across this tempering technique today. There was naturally no way he was going to let it go. However, he did not expect Sima Ji of True Fire Sect to appear out of nowhere. True Fire Sect was the strongest among the 5 major sects in terms of weapon refinement and elixir refinement. They did not lack tempering techniques as such. The reason why Sima Ji was bidding nonstop was because he did not want the disheveled old man to get his hands on that ancient book. Old man, I was right, wasn't I? Sima Ji laughed. Go back and don't come out to embarrass yourself. Many cultivators in the inner house were pointing and gossiping when they saw this. The disheveled old man's expression was terrible, and he was so angry that he was trembling. However, he could not refute. In room 1, Su Zimo suddenly stood up and looked at Gu Shi. Chief Steward, can you lend me some spirit stones? Lend what? If you want to get that ancient book, just bid. Gu Shi seemed to have expected this. She merely smiled and crossed her hands in front of her as she casually spoke.